What stupid question earned someone in your class the dunce cap? In class, we were discussing the hole in the ozone layer. Some girl just blurts out, "Oh, that's the hole that the space shuttle flies through, right?" Wait, so the British were fighting for England? This was during a Western civilizations course. We were talking about the moon in our 10th grade class, and this girl goes, "Is there still a moon?" The teacher's just like, what? "Do we still have a moon?" And the whole class was silent. Biology teacher says, "Look at the person sitting next to you. You share 99% of your DNA with them." Student goes, "Oh my god, is that why you did the seating chart this way?" That's stunningly hilarious. I can't even feel like facepalming like with the rest of these. Just, oh my god. The amount of credit that guy was willing to give his teacher? Wow. In my 10th grade history class, we were talking about when George Washington had 4 bullet holes in his coat jacket and 2 horses shot out from under him. So the teacher asked if anybody knew which battle this happened in, and this girl in my class raises her hand and says, "Vietnam." I was honestly impressed with how stupid she was. We were learning about the events leading up to World War II at Hebrew school in 6th grade. The teacher said, "The Jews were killed by the thousands." And I crap you not, a girl in class asked, "Who are the thousands?" Is a walrus an animal? I had to explain to basically 75% of a science class in high school that ants were in fact animals. They didn't believe me, so I had them go to the teacher. They were shocked bugs were in fact animals. I think a lot of people get confused between an animal and a mammal. I've heard a lot of people who say fish aren't animals or lizards aren't animals as well, so there's obviously some lapse in education there. Somebody in my class once asked if the plural to moose was meese, to which one girl replied, "Mooses aren't even real, why does it matter?" And I will never forget the look on the teacher's face, which was just the vibe of pure loathing. Well, let's be fair to him, it's not often that you're drastically confronted with your failure as an educator. It can't be easy for that guy. During my sophomore year of high school, I was in human anatomy. We were talking about how baby's gender is determined, and a girl asked, "If 2 lesbians have a baby, does it automatically come out a girl?" She was dead serious. Topic question was, how would you survive without water if stranded in the middle of the ocean? And this girl in class says, "Oh, that's a dumb question. I'd just put the ocean water in a cup, and then the salt would just evaporate." Probably the most vivid moment I remember from all of high school. Wait, volcanoes are real? I thought they were just made up. This was a high school freshman, by the way. High school chemistry class, we were working on a lab where we had to make little squares on a piece of plastic to perform tests in, and the squares had to have 2 centimeter long sides. This kid at my lab table, who'd already proven to be not so bright in class many times beforehand, got our teacher's attention and then asked what a centimeter was. After the teacher thoroughly explained what a centimeter was and where exactly to find them on the ruler in front of him, the student turned to us and said, "I still don't understand the centimeter thing." I'm a high school teacher. We were discussing if you would be a different person if your parents named you differently. A clearly green herb medicated student finds out I have a first name and is shocked, then proceeds to ask, "Wait, Mrs. Milkweed, what's your last name?" College sociology class. I don't remember how it came up. A girl wanted to know whether the Earth is a planet. Back in my high school history class, we were discussing the Vietnam War, and I raised my hand and asked, "Who's Agent Orange?" thinking it was a person. Astronomy class test review with about 500 students, discussing what wavelengths of light make it to the Earth's surface from the sun. A girl raised her hand and asked, "Where does the visible light go at night?" Completely seriously. The professor, in shock, replied, "The other side of the Earth." In my world history class, did food exist back then? I feel like this question had to have just come out wrong. There is absolutely no way that this was a legitimate question, and if it was, life must be very hard for that poor person. Is Australia in Europe? And no, the boy who asked this question did not mean Austria, he meant Australia. He said it 3 times. I was in a history class in community college and we were discussing New York City's role in the Revolutionary War. The teacher had been referring to the English as the British and the English interchangeably, and after a while one kid raised his hand and asked, "Are the British and the English on the same side? Because I always thought the Revolutionary War was America versus Britain versus England." And the kid was dead serious. It was a 100-level class, but come on, seriously? I was in a class once when this girl, in the middle of a lecture, interrupted by pointing to the map on the wall that had America in the center, asking why there were two Russias, one on each side of the world. That particular part of the world had to be divided to each side to accommodate the US's central positioning on that map. This was college, mind you. A girl in high school earth science class felt compelled to ask the following: where does the sun go at night? How many seconds are in a meter? In my high school earth science class, we were talking about the origin of the moon. One girl asks, did people live on the moon back then? So, do you speak like Portuguese? In response to me telling a girl in her mid-20s that I was from Portland, Oregon. This happened today, and it hurts to think about. So, is Alaska a state, or are you just messing with me? I mean, I know someone who thinks there are 52 states. There are 50 states including Alaska and Hawaii, which means there are 52. And he continued this belief even after being proven wrong. Teacher said, your essay needs to be 1,000 words. A student immediately put their hand up. Is a semicolon a word? I'm like, is illegal good or bad? I always get them confused. The same girl was asked on a health test to name 3 common bedroom transmissible diseases and said, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, needles, and downstairs fluids. This girl got into university. Is Mars a country? I mean, I hear they import some good chocolate from Mars. Freshman in bio at college. Having to do some simple stoichiometry for finding out how much of a particular chemical is produced in some cycle, I can't remember which one. Wait, 0.5 and half are the same thing? Wait, what? Jesus Christ, no wonder I failed every equation I've done since the 7th grade. I thought this was going to be a video on stupid people, not things that even very smart people like me don't know. We were in Year 9 chemistry and were discussing things like how everything kinda can become a solid if you go below a certain temperature. This one kid, who was the top of the class in chemistry and physics, sat there pondering, thinking about this stunning revelation. Solid air? Solid helium? In the end, he raises his hand with the stunned look of someone who had just discovered the Higgs boson and asks the life-changing question. Does that mean, like, can you get solid water? It was me. Girl in my 12th grade French class once asked, why would I want to go to another country when Paris is in America? 9th grade English teacher was collecting food and stuff to send it to Japan after the tsunami, namely rice. A girl raised her hand and asked if it was to soak up all of the water. The teacher's look of disappointment could be felt down to her soul. We had a Native American speaker come to my world religions class one day. He spoke to us about how missionaries came to his reservation and nearly destroyed their culture and livelihood. He brought up how depressing and difficult it is to live in the US. Then a girl raises her hand and asks, well, if you don't like it here, why don't you just leave and go to a different country? We were discussing forest fires that were going on somewhere in the Midwest at the time, and a girl asked, how can the fires keep burning for more than one day? Do they start back up again every morning? She literally thought the fires only burn in the daytime. This was in a college class. In a life skills class, and we'd just finished watching the horror show that is the assortment of slides showing different transmissible diseases. The teacher proceeds to show us how to put a Johnny on what can only be described as a banana-themed marital aid. After he'd finished, he solemnly asks if anyone has any questions. At first, no hands go up as everyone in the room is in voiceless agreement that the sooner this ordeal is over, the better. Suddenly, I see a hand slowly raise itself. It's attached to the really weird Asian kid. We all had one. His words, while bizarre and cause for extreme condemnation, cut through the awkwardness like a hot knife through the lubricant on slide 4. Where can I get one of those banana things from? We had a very serious, pretty uninformative life skills class going on. We did a section on gay bedroom activities, and it's clear the teacher isn't really comfortable and all the kids are kind of blushing and giggling. Finally, at the end of class, teacher asks if there are any questions. A kid raises his hand and, with a totally straight face, says, I heard if 2 gay guys are doing the deed and the one in front toots, the other one blows up. I've never seen a classroom descend into chaos that quickly. Another one in health class, grade 10, guest speaker talking about oxytocin. Explains oxytocin is the love hormone that allows you to form a connection with another person. And a kid asks, So when you tickle your pickle, do you fall in love with yourself? And I immediately lost it, laughing so hard. Then the kid threatened to fight me. It was a good day. But wait, aren't Canadians from Canada? In a graduate-level computer science class during a lecture on memory allocation, I'm sorry, what's a byte? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. High school. Aren't the Greeks and Romans the same thing? No. Oh, awkward. Goes back to playing Plants vs. Zombies on his phone. But if evolution is true, why don't squirrels give birth to chipmunks? I broke my pencil in half upon hearing that particular gem. Second semester of Spanish, prepping for the midterm. Teacher says, now is the time to ask any questions you're unsure of. Girl in the front row goes, is there a difference between L and la? The teacher just didn't know what to do. So, were the dinosaurs before or after the Greeks? Guys, this girl had never gone to church in her whole life, and we were taught that the Earth is more than 6,000 years old or whatever. Massachusetts public schools for the win. This was a 10-question open notes take-home quiz in my college sociology class. Some girl asked, am I going to fail this test because I got half the questions wrong? The professor's reaction was essentially just the emoji angry face. I was in 8th grade. A kid asked what Thomas Edison did during the Revolutionary War. That kid wasn't too bright. These two gems came from the same person. Is a 20-minute shower long? And is Egypt a religion? We were talking about galaxies and how they form, and as the teacher was talking about how they form, one girl slowly raises her hand. She's asked some stupid crap before, so the teacher calls her name with a tangible amount of reluctance and dread, and this girl asks, if you throw a peanut out into the universe, will it eventually become a galaxy of its own? The teacher had a hard time trying to stay nice to her after that question. We had two guys from the University Student Association come into our chemistry lecture promoting an event, and they had free tickets to give away, so one of them tried to come up with a chemistry-related question. He came up with, how many atoms in hydrogen? The lecturer had to explain to this guy that hydrogen was an atom. He meant how many atoms in hydrogen, like how many atoms in a water molecule, the human body, or a badger. In college intro to astronomy class, the girl up front responded with 2 miles when the professor asked the class for the diameter of the Earth. I'm fairly certain any end-to-end measurement of our university exceeded 2 miles. The entire class laughed at her, which is what she deserved. Maybe she was just more used to the metric system. But yeah, even the hardest proponent of kilometers would know that the conversion to miles isn't roughly a 6,500th. What's the difference between fish and mammals? That's the final year of university, biology major in a class called Vertebrate Evolution. Everyone I tell this story to says it makes them feel a little happier. In middle school history, we were watching a film on Lewis and Clark. The narrator said something like, and there the explorers stopped and drank from the ice-cold water. One of the guys in my class asks aloud, did they know what ice was back then? I asked him if this was before or after the Great Ice Age. My friend, a teacher, had a 15-year-old girl ask him who the current president was. In a big hall sociology class, we were learning about social mores. A student asked, is that what the song's about? What song? When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's a more? Entire class was staring in stunned silence at this new stupidity. Then the professor does the kid the biggest solid I've ever seen by saying, very funny. But then the student wouldn't drop it and says he wasn't joking. Professor says, trust me, you're joking. And the class is in uproarious laughter. So, what was the homework? This was less than 5 seconds after the homework was announced and the professor wrote it on the board. Every gosh darn class. High school freshman history class. The class was watching a movie about the events leading up to the outbreak of World War II. During the film, a shot from a newsreel featuring a fat, bald Asian man waving to the camera is shown. At this moment, a girl in the class asks loudly, is that the name of the leader of the Third Reich? And the room goes silent. The teacher pauses the film from his seat at his desk, walks to the front of the class, in front of the TV screen, and stands there. He looks to the girl, an emotionless stare on his face. He stays there for a moment, Then he casts his gaze to the floor, shakes his head, and turns to walk back to his desk. The video is then resumed without comment. My girlfriend student teaches. She was explaining to her 7th graders some of the basic rules, including water is the only beverage allowed in the classroom, no soda, no tea, no energy drinks, only water. And some kid asked her, "What about invisible Kool-Aid?" Like, not even joking, just straight up serious. I think he still gives her nightmares. Halfway through the semester in my linear algebra class, we were solving some system, and a guy seemed absolutely astounded that you could add 2 equations together. I believe his exact words were, "You can do that? Just add equations together?" Keep in mind that most people learn how to do that in 10th grade. It's even funnier because he was actually a really smart guy. I'm just not sure if everything was working in his head on that day, though. Grade 11 university-level biology. A girl kind of known for being occasionally dim explains, "Wait, people actually die from acquired immune deficiency syndrome?" Needless to say, all of us, including the teacher, died a little inside that day. And also, before anyone says it, I do know that people usually die from infections that the weakened immune system caused by acquired immune deficiency syndrome allows, but she wasn't referring to that. She was shocked that this thing she kept hearing about was actually a death sentence to so many people. She was not saying this because she was getting technical and demonstrating knowledge. She legitimately understood the acronym of that aforementioned disease to just be some sort of serious flu. She had no idea that it causes millions of deaths. Now, given that this was in the 8th grade, but nevertheless, a girl asked me how to spell GPS. Yes, English is her first language, and yes, she still takes crap for it 5 years later. Me, speaking to a student. I say, "Can you please plug this power extension into the wall?" Which end?" "Wait, are you serious? I get confused." "The pointy end goes in the wall." It should be noted I was working at a university at the time, and this student was 18 years old. English class focusing on comedy. This girl comes to class blazed, can't stop laughing, is super disruptive, and then decides to ask, "What is truth?" Which, this is a lower div English class, we don't have time for your green herb-induced philosophical problems. "Can I go to the bathroom?" "This is college, you idiot, of course you can." In my world history class, we were talking about the Egyptians, and my teacher made a joke about how one of the pharaohs looked like he was an alien that had been sent to rule the people. A girl then asked how the aliens got to Earth because there was no technology back in that time period, right? Everyone did a facepalm and an "Are you frickin' serious right now?" look. Why did they split the 13 colonies up into 50 states? This was in college. At the Jewish History Museum on an excursion, somebody interrupted the guide while they were explaining the Passover meal. Why do Jews do communion when they don't believe in Jesus who invented it? In Earth Science class in 9th grade. If the sun is so hot, how come the tape measure doesn't melt when we measure the distance from the Earth to the sun? In 9th grade biology, how are deer made out of meat if they eat grass all day? Yeah. When talking about the war in Iraq during class, a girl asked, "Is Islam near Iraq?" We'd just discovered World War II in advanced placement US history, and a reasonably intelligent guy asked when Napoleon got involved. When we laughed, he asked if we'd already covered him, and we explained, yes, 142 years prior with the Louisiana Purchase. My friend, who's basically a World War II buff, and doesn't every school have one, was just busting a gut, and this otherwise smart kid just sat back down with a perplexed and humbled look on his face. I mean, we've all gotten a name mixed up before. I think it's a fair bet that that's what happened here, because the only other alternative is this guy believing that blue-coated, musket-armed guardsmen were being strafed by Messerschmitt Bf-109s and run over by tanks, which is hilarious, but not a thing that happened. A senior girl in Trig when I was in sophomore asked what 0.5 was as a fraction because she forgot. It's a good thing she's pretty. In 2013, is the President of Canada Barack Obama? I don't even. In my Geography of Africa class, a girl asked, "Why do Africans always complain about not having water? It's not like they live in houses. Can't they just move their shacks closer to water?" And I couldn't even. A girl in my high school asked my teacher if America was a subset of the United States and where it was located. 2 years later in government class, this same girl was also surprised to find out that England is on an island and not connected to the rest of Europe. I cringed really hard at a work meeting the other day. The manager said, "We've been thinking about hiring some temps to help with the workload, and if the load doesn't lighten after 6 months, we'll keep the best ones on as permanent staff." Lucas said, "Well, how much will the temps really do though, since they ain't getting paid?" He was thinking of the word intern, but it made him look especially stupid because he came to us from a temp agency. What happens if you put a bag of fries in an air conditioner? It was a thermal physics course, and the kids struggled for years to graduate with a physics degree. Alas, the professors always found his understanding merited an F. Okay, maybe not the worst, but a girl in my class continually asks if she can take a new page in her book when writing down notes. She's 15. In high school, how can evolution be true? That's like saying a black person and a white person are related. They can't be related, they have completely different skin. Yes, that was a question that was asked this decade. When exactly was the War of 1812 again? What food group does potpourri belong in? Have you been eating potpourri? My sophomore year of college, I took a biology class. The professor asked, "Can anyone give me an example of something hydrophobic?" This kid in the front raised his hand and said, "Cats." It's not what the teacher was looking for, but I guess it's true, and it got a lot of laughs. Wait a minute. Flamingos have 2 legs? Doctors, what was your dumbest, "I am very smart," patient experience? RN here. I see some crazy stuff, but one thing that stands out was the time I was admitting a guy to the hospital. I can't really remember what for, but he was about 400 pounds, diabetic, heart disease, you name it. Anyhow, I'm at the computer going over some admission questions with him and his 10 family members who are crowded in the room with him. A few minutes in, he starts complaining that he's thirsty. He needs something to drink right now. So I get on my phone and call the nurse assistant and ask her to bring some ice water. As soon as the words are out of my mouth, the whole family screams, "No! No water! He's allergic to water!" Well, this is going to be a problem. Turns out the guy has been drinking nothing but Sprite and sweet tea for years because of his water allergy. The next question the wife had was, "Where are we all supposed to sleep?" The whole family, 10 people, were planning to stay at the hospital with him. You can't make this crap up. I work in the ER. We had a very pregnant patient come in needing stitches in her hoo-ha. Turns out she was a realtor and didn't want her water to break while she was showing a house, so she put a glass cup in her pants to catch the water. Instead of using a pad or an adult diaper, she went for a glass cup. She sat down while showing a house, and sure enough, it broke and cut her up pretty bad down there. As a male who doesn't have the same anatomy as the woman in this story, I can tell you that I'm still in immense sympathetic pain right now. Oh, I have one. I got this from my friend, who's a doctor in the children's ward in a rural hospital. The parents bring in their child whose hair is infested with lice. The lice were visible to the naked eye and could be seen crawling on the child's clothing. While the medical staff examined the child, in order to determine a course of action, they discovered the child was covered in white powder and smelled heavily of chemicals. They asked the parents what were the substances and the smells emanating from the child. The parents said, quite matter of fact, it was 7 powder, and the flea and tick spray they used on their dogs on the family farm. Needless to say, social workers were notified about this case. 70-year-old female tripped and fell 2 days ago. She came up with hip pain, but reports after the fall her nose was bleeding. She had landed on her nose. About a year prior, her dentist had messed up an infraorbital nerve block and caused some swelling in that region, but that was all solved. This old lady is now convinced her nosebleed after falling on her face is related to an infection from the dental issue a year ago. After multiple back and forth on the etiology of the nosebleed, she became the first patient I raised my voice and put down an authoritative, "No, you're just wrong, just stop it." Work for an optometrist, and it was the month before school started, and a woman brought in her son to have his eyes checked for the first time. Seems like a pretty reasonable thing for any parent, even if he was a little older than usual for the first eye exam. Better late than never, I guess. The mum was well-spoken and appeared fairly intelligent. Everything went as normal, the doctor examined the boy and ended up prescribing glasses. When the doctor was explaining to the mum that her son had to wear his glasses all the time, since he's nearsighted and basically can't see clearly past 5 inches in front of him, and will definitely need glasses for school. For some reason, this caused a switch to flip in the mum, and she spazzed out on the doctor, saying that her son doesn't need glasses, that the doctor is only saying that he does because he wants to sell glasses. She says that she only brought her son in because there was some form for school that needed to be filled out, and the doctors are all con artists trying to push unnecessary medications and interventions. The doctor tried to calm her down and explain that he's only trying to help them, but that she was free to get a second opinion and give her kid a copy of the kid's prescription and sent them on their way. About 4 months later, the lady is back asking for another copy of the son's prescription. Apparently, the first semester midterm results were in, and her son had failed all of them because he couldn't see the board in his classes and needs, guess what, glasses. Something similar happened with my mother when she was a kid. If I recall the story correctly, she was about 3, and she had always sat real close to the TV. My grandma kept scolding her for lying because she could see just fine. Well, Grandma got tired of hearing excuses and took my mom to the optometrist. The optometrist told her in no uncertain terms that she was nearsighted and needed glasses. My grandma was shocked at the news. Came back later to get the glasses, and on the way out, my mom just looks up at her mom and says, "Mommy, I can see you." My grandma just crumbled in tears at that. Me, is there any chance you could be pregnant? Patient? Definitely not. Are you doing the deed with anyone right now? Yes. What is your preferred method of birth control? Nothing. Shoot me now. Any variation of this, which I get all the fricking time. Me. So how are things going with your diabetes? Them. I don't have diabetes. Then why are you taking metformin, Victoza, or whatever? I used to have diabetes. Then replace diabetes with hypertension, anti-hypersensitives, etc., or when I ask them what medical diagnosis they have and they say none while taking a ton of meds, or when they misname a body part, prostrate, tendant, uterus, to name a few. Oh hey, my doctor remembers all of my visits. That's nice. He was so good when he took out my inflamed appendix. Not a doctor, but I'm a nurse who worked in the OR at a trauma center. Was doing surgery on a 19-year-old substance user who tested positive for crystal and white snow, who was grilling the anesthesiologist about every drug we were going to use in surgery because he doesn't like putting chemicals in his body. Gotta stick with that organic, fair trade, non-GMO white snow. Oh, and on a similar note from the trauma center, guy is trespassing in a junkyard and gets his arms and legs screwed up by a pit bull. Have to clean out all these wounds. Flash forward to 3 a.m. that night, I get called in to do a case. Apparently the guy left the hospital AMA to go get revenge on the dog, and the dog bit him in the face, breaking some facial bones and poking a few more holes in the process. Classic. Most of my own stories go along similar lines to patient has chest pain driving a coachload of schoolchildren, thinks it's indigestion, swigs a bottle of Gaviscon, later diagnosed with huge heart attack. My favorite ever story from a colleague, a patient comes into A&E with abdominal pain. As part of the work, he gets an abdominal x-ray, which shows the problem as clear as day. The colleague then has proceeded to remove from the patient's rectum an 8-inch replica of Nelson's column, the statue in the centre of Trafalgar Square, London. On showing it to the patient, the response was, "Oh, that's Nelson. He lives up there." I've got 2 stories that stick out in my mind. The first is the mother of a toddler who came into the ER. The kid had cruddy green and bloody stuff coming out of his left nostril and a lot of redness and swelling of only the left side of his nose and the adjacent cheek. Mum was sure he caught a sinus infection and just wanted some antibiotics. Now, I know some kids like shoving whatever will fit into their body orifices, and that this was more than likely given the one-sided nature of his condition, but Mum was insistent that he never puts things in his nose. It took some convincing, but I finally got her to let me take a look. Gave a squirt of midazolam in the good nostril to settle him, then dug in with some tweezers through the crud until I pulled out a big old button battery. Would have been burning his nose for a couple of days. Hopefully, he healed up well. Side note, if a kid swallows a button battery, it can do similar things to their esophagus. This was an emergency and needs to be dealt with ASAP. When I was a medical student, I did an overnight ambulance ride-along. It was a slow night, so I was excited when dispatch called about what sounded like a stroke or a loss of consciousness. We zip over there, and the paramedic knocks on the door of a darkened house. A man opens the door slowly and says, "Oh yeah, she's in the back room." My sense of foreboding grew as we slowly made our way through the dim house, wondering what awful sight I would see back there. Just before we get to the back room, the light flicks on and this spry elderly woman practically bounces out of the room, carrying her bag of meds, cheerily saying, "Oh good, hello gentlemen, let's go to the dining room and I'll tell you what's been happening." She explains how she's on meds for high blood pressure, but instead of taking them as prescribed, she takes more or less depending on how she's feeling or something. Before bed, she took her BP on her home automatic machine, and it was a little high, so she kept repeating it and the numbers kept going higher and higher. She thought she was going to stroke out, so called 911. Of course, they were going up because she was freaking out about the previously high numbers, causing a vicious cycle. Even though both I and the paramedic knew she was more than likely fine, neither of us were doctors, so we had to take her to the hospital for assessment. So yeah, either she didn't understand her meds and the machine properly, or she thought she was too smart to follow her doctor's instructions. Patient had a hard time getting pregnant. Finally conceived, but miscarried. Patient has a D&C so she can try again, this time with medical intervention. We monitor her blood to ensure the pregnancy hormone has gone before beginning the treatment, but she keeps coming back with high levels of hormone. Docs are worried because she might have retained placenta or pituitary disorder, and this could be super bad for future fertility. We call her in for a conversation about the hormone levels not going away. After talking together about what might be wrong, they are going home and think about further tests. She says, "I need to go. I have an appointment at the weight loss center for an HCG shot." Turns out she is on the HCG diet. HCG is the pregnancy hormone. And this was after an hour of the docs saying, "We don't know why you have these constant high levels of HCG in your blood, and we're worried." Had a young woman with recurring UTIs that began after a recent partner and with no STDs. Went through the standard questions trying to figure out what could be causing them, and eventually found out she had been lubricating with jelly. Not KY jelly. The mix-up had literally been a joke in the house afterwards. It took me some effort to keep a straight face, but eventually we resolved the problem and she stopped getting UTIs. Oh dear sweet lord. Not only did she do this, but her partner must have at the very least just decided to go ahead anyway, or even worse, also thought it was a perfectly fine substance to use. Oh, I have two good ones that come to mind. Clinical pharmacist here, by the way, with one story in the ER and one in the pharmacy. ER physician told me this one. 16-year-old boy presented to the ER with an extremely swollen, discolored eggplant. Apparently, he's been using his mum's insulin needles to draw blood out of his arm and inject it into his own member. He thought that adding blood would help increase his size. His eggplant was terribly infected and he was hospitalized for a week or so. One day in the pharmacy, a girl comes to the counter requesting a refill for her birth control. We pulled up her profile and realized we couldn't refill it because she just got a 28-day fill less than 2 weeks ago. When we asked what happened to the other one, she said she was out. Apparently both her and her boyfriend were each taking a pill each, and was adamant that was how they needed to prevent pregnancy. I'm a corpseman, not a doctor, but I once had a patient tell me there was no credible research that smoking was bad for one's health. Okay. Optician here. We had a patient who refused to let us use the tonometer, a machine for checking ocular internal pressure to diagnose glaucoma. He said that puff machine gives you glaucoma, and we weren't going to pull that on him. He told us his father got an exam and had glaucoma after using that machine. His uncle and brother also had no signs of glaucoma, and after getting the puff test, both people had been diagnosed with the disease. Glaucoma doesn't have any outward symptoms before you start going blind. The moron just told me he has a very strong familial disposition to glaucoma and refused to be tested for it. Also, puff isn't that bad, guys. Try contacts. Your eyes stop fighting back pretty quick. The puff is a lot better than the old machine. It just hits you on the eyeball with a little ball on a lever. I've also had plenty of patients that don't understand family history. I interview patients directly so we don't have any real paperwork, and too many people can't answer simple questions. Do you or any direct families also have diabetes? Yes. Yourself or your family? Alternately, if yes to family members, they start listing their spouses, family, or stepchildren. That's not how genetic disposition works. After getting no answers to diabetes, hypertension, glaucoma, thyroid problem, heart problems, etc., I ask if they take any medications. Yeah, atorvastatin, thyroidazine, metformin, and low-dose aspirin. Oh, so you have everything I asked about. Check. You want some more? Way too many people don't understand presbyopia. As you age, your lens hardens and can't focus up close anymore. Of course, when this is explained, I get a lot of people who believe they're way too young for bifocals. No, 60 is not too young for bifocals. Why doesn't the doctor wear bifocals? He does. He's wearing progressives, you don't see the line. Or, after trying to get used to multifocal lenses for a few days, giving up and demanding we remake them as singular vision, and then getting mad at me when they can't read with them. I never needed bifocals before, why can't you just make me regular glasses? Regular glasses always worked just fine. Yeah, you used to be 20. Also, you came to see us because you can't read with your regular glasses. In the same vein, these same people complaining about their insurance to me because progressives are expensive. Aligned bifocal is covered entirely. Progressives cost a lot more. I can't have lines in my glasses like an old person. Then you want progressives. This easily triples the bill. Why are you so expensive? I need to be able to see. Yeah, you need a bifocal. You don't need a progressive. You want a progressive. Insurance pays for what you need, not want. I actually had a guy make me talk to his insurance agent about him needing medically necessary progressives. A progressive lens is never medically necessary. Stop being cheap and listen to what I say. I'm not a salesman, I'm a medical professional. Stop acting like you know better than me. I'm going to trust that this person is actually a medical professional here to rant with his colleagues because I don't understand half the words he said. Oh, we've had a patient with cataracts tell us the optometrist was incompetent. She couldn't possibly have cataracts because she doesn't have cats. This was also the patient with 6120RE and 660LE, and Binoc VAs tell us we were lying and just trying to sell him glasses. We weren't. It was a government-mandated acuities test and we aren't permitted to make sales off them. His logic, he hasn't been for a sight test in 17 years, so there's no way he needs glasses. He got back into his car and drove off. We've never sent paperwork back to the authorities so quickly. 80-plus-year-old patient who was declining with multiple diagnoses and about 3 decubitus ulcers. Daughter was adamant that her father be kept on his strict paleo diet because that would supercharge his healing. She had a stack of diet books. He simply wasn't getting enough nutrition to heal the ulcers. He didn't like the diet at all, by the way. At some point, you kind of have to stop being polite and just tell patients or family members bluntly that you don't have time for this crap and what you recommend and they can do what they want and just document everything. It happens a lot, but she sticks out. Oh yeah, we had an elderly woman with severe malnutrition and her hippie daughter wanted us to only give her raw, unpasteurized goat's milk. We did everything we could to convince her that her mother wasn't getting enough nutrition. We even tried to allow her to bring in the raw, unpasteurized goat's milk that we would supplement with the FDA-approved formula that we wanted to give her mother through the feeding tube. We finally had to become pretty blunt with the daughter and let her know that her mother was going to die due to malnutrition due to the daughter's unique views on what was a proper diet for her mother. All the time. I'm a veterinarian and I can't tell you how many clients want to explain to me that their pet's illness can be fixed if they're fed a raw diet or a grain-free diet or fish oil supplements, whatever. Sure, come back to me when your dog's huge memory mass ulcerates and starts leaking pus everywhere and we can reevaluate how well her raw diet is working to fix that. I'm a dental student. One patient in particular is a pathological liar. During one visit, they claimed to have gone to medical school. Next visit that they did, dental army. Last visit was that they had a PhD. The patient will say things like, "Hey doc, do you need me to move my head mesial or distal?" "No, I need you to move your head right." "Hey doc, are these cavities being caused by the anaerobic pathology microbes?" "No, they're caused by you eating snacks all day and not brushing." Not my story, rather my colleagues. A patient was admitted for anemia and a localized cancer was found. She referred to surgery so that she can get cured from her localized cancer, and she just started telling everyone that it was the doctors who caused the cancer, and that she was doing just fine before coming to the hospital. She lectured the surgeon and my colleague who pleaded her to get her surgery so that the cancer doesn't advance, and yet she refused, saying she knew better and probably didn't even have cancer. ERRN here, not a physician, but you may find this interesting. Young adult male presents with multiple abscesses on various parts of his body. States he injected his boyfriend's splooge into himself trying to get pregnant. He tells one of the APCs he should have gone with his original plan and tried it on his dog first. The psych clears him. He's admitted to the floor and gets IV antibiotics. WTF. The things that we read for you, dear listeners. I hope that at least some of you enjoyed that because I need to go and evacuate my dinner, then cry about the state of the human race. Where to start? Here's just a few of my stories. Picture a middle-aged man. His index finger is 5 times the size of the rest of his fingers. It smells, it's leaking pus, there's necrotic tissue, basically one huge infected, cancerous finger. He was a firm believer in not taking any sort of medication, including antibiotics or chemo. Died a few weeks later, but he did manage to tell us that we were all idiots before he passed away. Patient was a young child who came in with an extremely high blood glucose level. Once she was stable, we did some teaching and kept her for a few days of observation. For some reason, every time I checked her, her levels would be extremely high, although we were appropriately treating her. Turns out her family would bring her fast food for every meal and hide it in the side table. More teaching and resources were put into place. Had a mum in hysterics because she was convinced that her mother's, friend's, stepson's, teacher's dog has MRSA, so her baby was going to die. It took everything within me to not tell her that most of the hospital staff have MRSA, but it took 3 hours for me to finally calm her down after I called infectious control, her pediatrician, gynecologist, and family doctor. Yes, I had to call all of these people. Yes, they laughed at me. Yes, she was beside me the whole time, questioning their judgment. I love my job, but at times it makes me crazy. Not a doctor, but a gastro nurse. We had a recurring patient who was just a really very strange lady. She had a stoma that absolutely stank to the high heavens because the last 20 years, she has not been cleaning it properly. Every single day, her stoma would come off because she was twisting the drain tube and wouldn't allow us to change it. So this lady was really rude and would shout at us too, and one night shift I couldn't take it anymore and I snapped at her. I didn't yell, but I was overly stern about the fact that if she did not let me clean it and treat her stoma, then the MRSA that she wasn't able to get rid of because she refused Hibis scrub washes would eat her alive. In hindsight, I didn't handle that very well, but she let me change the stoma. So this entire ordeal, she's yelling at me that her stoma bags are not cut to fit her stoma, that they are too small because her stoma is 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters, to which I corrected her, saying that's impossible. She was adamant that's how big her stoma was. It was 30 millimeters in diameter. When I was cleaning the stoma, she yelled at me because it was hurting, so she just wanted to pop the new one on. I explained it was hurting because of her infection because she never cleans it. She proceeded to tell me that she knows better because she's had the stoma for nearly as long as I've been alive. I eventually tell her to shut up and let me do my job, which seemed to work, and the stoma did not come off again that shift. When she was eventually discharged, she refused every placement to the point where we almost considered a court order to evict her. One of our F1s nearly cried with relief.
Redditors who lost their job because of a post to a social media platform. What happened? I've recently come into contact with a few people who lost their job over a Facebook-type social media outlet post, and it got me wondering, what kind of jobs take social media posts so seriously? I worked customer support for a mobile game company. I was honest with a disheartened customer who had complained that recent changes had made the game pay to win. It had, in truth, been a glitch with an update. I told them as much, assuring them the team would be fixing it in the next update. But then the game's profits skyrocketed. The team kept the glitch and put out a statement describing the change as an intentional one designed to improve the play experience. But there was my name, plastered all over the game forums, claiming the opposite. I technically worked for a separate company that provided support for several studios, but the studio behind this game was our biggest customer. They approached my bosses, furious that I jeopardized their cash cow, and demanded I be fired. I promptly became familiar with the underside of the bus as I was gone within the week. TLDR, worked customer support for mobile games, told truth, went viral-ish, fired. Didn't lose my job, but I watched a friend lose his over a tweet. He tweeted, "So getting head while delivering pizzas is pretty sweet," one night while he was working. The next morning, he tweeted, "Yo, screw you, Papa John's. I don't need you or your stupid job anyway," or something to that effect. I've never laughed so hard in my life. I used to work for Geek Squad in college, and a coworker was fired when a famous actor came in and she posted on Facebook a lot of his private info. Like full name came into her store and bought this and has a black Amex card and stuff he had on his computer. Not once, but on 2 separate occasions. Worked at GameStop until 2010. The store was in a mall, and parents would always leave their kids in the store and go do their shopping. Sometimes the children would cry, sometimes they'd pee themselves, even had one number 2. Parents would get mad at us for not bringing them to the bathroom, what the heck? Or start screaming at their kids for not just playing games for a few hours without causing any problems. I tweeted about how the store wasn't there to babysit children and never really thought about that tweet again. Until, a few months later, same thing. Parent drops kid off in store, leaves. 20 minutes later, an older-looking guy is outside the store on his flip phone, aiming it at the store. He's creeping me out, but I continue offering pointless warranties to customers while waiting for my next break. And then, I noticed him walk near the entrance of the store and ask that kid where his parents are. This seemed really fishy, and the guy looked beyond suspicious. I was thinking he could be a kitty diddler, and I was right. He gets the kid to go with him, I call up mall security so they could check it out, and they caught him before he left the mall. He was arrested. The kid was crying, asking for his mom, who mall security could not reach because, as it turns out, she went to some stores outside of the mall area and she didn't actually come back for another 2 hours, at which point she threatened to sue me, GameStop, the mall, etc. Security guard lady told her that child services were called. They all walked away. That was the last time I saw them. A few days later, district manager, DM, shows up in store and I was fired on the spot because that lady made a complaint. DM found my Twitter and informed me that my approach to yesterday's dilemma and my tweet about how GameStop isn't a babysitting service has made them believe that I don't have the, quote, GameStop spirit. Both the manager and district manager told me I could use them as a reference on my resume though, which was great until they both lost their jobs a few weeks later. A former colleague of mine posted about how he was going to use up all his sick leave and then quit. He posted it at 9 a.m. He was told he had no more job at 11. I was working as a bartender and server for a place. The assistant manager was a petty tyrant and treated the staff like crap. I had made several complaints about him to the general manager and the owner with some of the other staff, but they refused to do anything about it. So I was done with this place and was currently looking for a new job when one day I was bartending and a very young-looking girl came. She hands me her out-of-state ID and I can tell that it is fake. I politely tell her that I can't serve her alcohol and explain that in this state we don't legally have to accept out-of-state IDs, blah blah blah. She was actually very understanding and there was no scene or issue. Her other friends arrive and they move to a table and I inform their server about the fake ID. It is around this time that the assistant manager, who had been drinking Bloody Marys at the bar next door all morning and then napping in the office, came over. He then starts telling me that I don't know what a fake ID looks like and I don't have the right to refuse service and how stupid I am. He then tells me I have to serve the girl. I inform him that I have the legal right to refuse service and he cannot force me to. Anyway, I go home and post on Facebook about my day, and then include a photo of when I was managing a liquor store holding a device of medieval defense made out of all the fake IDs we had confiscated in 1 year. Also, a crown. The next day, I was called in and let go for refusing to cooperate with management and what have you. TLDR, got fired for posting a sweet picture of me wearing a crown and holding a shield of fake IDs. Not me, but the company I work for. A prospective employee just passed his interview and was told that all he needs to do is pass a drug test and a physical and he would start on Monday. The company Facebook guy found the new hire on Facebook and the guy had just posted 20 minutes after the interview, "Crap, anyone know how to pass a drug test in 24 hours?" I was younger and an idiot. I posted something on Facebook about wanting to go home and play The Sims so I could create telecommunications store I worked for on it and then slowly kill off all the customers. I was working a late night shift in a mall and forgot our new coworker had added me on Facebook days before. Joined a game studio alongside a guy who just finished his philosophy degree. He felt that the game's official forums were the best place to discuss whether disabled people would be, quote, of as much value as pigs after a post-apocalyptic event, and if they should be simply slaughtered and eaten, all using his company account, of course. I don't even know where to begin with this. I don't have the mental or physical capacity to give this guy the verbal beatdown he so desperately deserves. And probably physical beatdown too while we're at it. I was let go from the nation's third largest insurance company for what were called offensive tweets. Apparently, someone with my similar name was tweeting vulgar things to comedy accounts, and they brought me into HR and terminated me. Yes, I sued for wrongful termination so I could finish getting my MBA. I was once passed over for a job because I barely use Facebook. They straight up told me that they couldn't trust me because of how little info was on my page. For future reference, I'm sorry employers that 90% of my Facebook page is related to StarCraft and or miscellaneous gaming. I'm sorry that I don't get drunk and post embarrassing photos of things you could fire me over. My personal life is my business and not Facebook's.
You must construct additional profiles. We require more discreditable posts.
A company I worked for had it written into their 7-page contracts that you were not allowed to even reference said company on social media. Anyone in breach would be fired instantly. There's a page on Facebook called We Hate Blank that's currently one of the world's biggest corporate hate pages. It all started when someone working in our call center posted online about how much the customers suck. They began something of a war between the staff and customers posting on employees' walls and vice versa. The company was/is a major player in its market, essentially had a monopoly, and there was a noticeable drop in sales that year. All in all, around 20 people were fired. I work in a hospital, and there was a police shooting in my area a couple of years ago, and multiple officers were brought into our ER. One officer was dead on arrival, and a number of idiot hospital employees posted condolences on their Facebook pages with the name of the officer before the family was officially informed. If memory serves, 7 or 8 employees were rightfully fired for that one. It's amazing to hear all of the healthcare blunders. I work in an ICU and saw a pretty messed up violation of patient privacy. A nurse was trying to contact the wife of a patient of ours, but somehow got his ex-wife. The ex-wife lost her mind on the nurse and started demanding information. When we finally got a hold of the wife, it turns out that the patient has a restraining order on the ex-wife due to a bunch of issues and told us not to release any information. We marked the patient as confidential so she wouldn't be able to find him. The ex-wife kept calling us saying she knew he was still in there, what room number he was in, and other information that we never provided her. We were wondering how the ex-wife knew all of this, and how her name was listed as the next of kin. It turns out that her friend worked in the admitting department in the same hospital, and she was the one that A, updated the contact information, she apparently checks on his patient file constantly, and B, kept logging into one of our systems and released his health information, such as tests he's had, results to lab work, and reading history/transfer/discharge reports once the ex-wife told her that he was admitted to our unit. They apparently did this all the time whenever the ex-wife found out that her ex-husband was in our hospital for any reason. After a couple days of proper investigation, the admitting clerk was let go and fined for improperly accessing patient information/release of information. She basically killed her career for her friend, as we basically only have one healthcare entity in our area. Not me, but a girl on my Facebook worked for the postal service in my town. She posted on Facebook how she wanted to slit her boss's throat and went into some pretty gory details. Then, about 5 hours later, she posted another status about how the feds showed up at her house and that one of her coworkers had showed her boss the status and she was now fired. She's obviously really dumb and trashy. I had to fire an employee for a tweet he wrote about a customer. He tweeted, "Customer's full name would be a great name for a gay adult film star." I found out about it when the customer's lawyer called me the next day threatening action. Turns out the guy worked for the local newspaper and obsessively searched his name on all social media. A little over a year ago, a bunch of employees at my old job got a rash. It wasn't contagious, our blood was clean, and the doctors were confused. I took steroids from day 1 and had it for a little over 2 weeks, I believe. I didn't even have it as bad as a couple people. Everyone continued to work, even though some people had it in exposed areas. Employees were itching and talking about it, but management did nothing. Even the manager had it, but the owner didn't, so he didn't care to take any action. Well, I posted a picture of my rash on Reddit and gave absolutely no information on where I worked. It got to the front page of r/WTF and a coworker saw it and obviously recognized it. He showed people because he thought it was funny, but there was a coworker already out to get me and she was close with our manager. So they told the manager that I had posted the picture on Facebook, which obviously would have been a big deal. So the manager told me to leave, but said she would have the owner meet with me. I knew as soon as I got home that she wasn't going to tell the owner to contact me. But I was already planning to quit the next weekend, so I didn't bother to meet with him. I am not working at a place that allows the majority of their staff to get a rash and not investigate it. I should probably add that this was a restaurant. Not me, but my mom's ex-boyfriend. He was a waiter at a very elite restaurant and had normally expected very nice tips. Some guy left him a $5 tip for an over $100 bill and he got angry and posted the customer's information on Facebook. He got fired the next day. Wow, this blew up. It seems some people are making some pretty bad assumptions. So he was actually a very good waiter. High-end restaurants really wanted him. It probably went to his head at some point because he started to pick up a drinking/staying out late after work habit. He started having some issues with my mom as well, and they became roommates only. My mom moved out and he got really stressed, and I heard from his prior manager that he started getting strikes at work. He also frequently ranted on Facebook about bad customers. A while later, he posted the customer's info on Facebook and was fired. From what I know now, he's got a job at a bar, but is still drinking. He wasn't a bad guy by any means. He just started losing himself and making really bad choices. My mom still keeps in contact with his family, but from what I hear, it's still bad. I had to fire someone for one. He was a volunteer firefighter and left for a call, which I allowed. 15 minutes later, someone showed me his 5-minute-old post of him riding quads, saying something along the lines of, "Sometimes you just need to F off from work." That put him on a final warning. He then left because he said his house was on fire. Then half an hour later, his wife tagged him in a photo of him sitting in a kiddie pool in front of the house. The funny thing is, in both cases, if he had simply asked to leave early, I probably would have said yes. To clarify, this was over a few different days, a few weeks apart, and he worked for me, but also volunteered as a firefighter. The fire chief also found out about this and dismissed him from that position as well. This guy had a few issues, needless to say, and honesty was not something with which he was familiar. My dad was in a similar position. The guy asked to leave early, my dad said yes. Then a half hour later, the guy posted that he was in the emergency room. We later learned that it was because he tore his urethra after he stuck a screwdriver in there. Edit. It was a Phillips. Oh my god, why is that so important to everyone? Okay. Reddit? Hi. It's me, the guy reading these posts. Don't stick things in your dingling where they don't belong. I remember reading about a guy who shoved a caulk gun up there one time, and I still cringed just as hard. So dingling havers of Reddit, please take care of yourselves because I don't want to have to read more about your trauma. It costs $0 to be nice to yourself. My female friend, 18, was DM'd through Twitter by the news presenter, 37, of our city. He was talking about her beach pictures and how she is really pretty and how they need to get together. She ended up telling him that it's pretty ridiculous that he's trying to get with her. He lost his job later that week. The only real reason he lost his job was because he used the Weather Channel's Twitter account. Oh, this happened to me many years ago. I was on the job a week at a law firm and had to ride with one of the female employees to the UPS store. She was a terrible driver and almost wrecked multiple times. I posted on Facebook, 1 week on the job and my coworker is trying to kill me. Worst driver ever. The next day, I was called into my boss's office with the girl sitting there with an expressionless look on her face, and there was a printout of my post. It was awkward and they fired me on the spot. All of my account information was also set to private, so they figured out a way to check my activity. Former Chipotle manager here. As many of you know, Chipotle gives away free crap on Halloween, so it's a mandatory weekend for everyone to work. Well, one of our employees called off that Thursday saying he had swine flu. Right. Of course, he posted pictures of his weekend partying on his Facebook, upon which he was friends with our kitchen manager, general manager, and district manager. Per company policy and common freaking sense, you can't return to work from serious contagious stuff without a doctor's note. So he shows back up on Wednesday acting all fine and saying the doc cleared him. Oh, but his mom threw his release note away. Too bad, buddy. We need that crap or you can't work. Since we didn't know when he would have it, we only gave him 1 day on the schedule anyway. So then his mommy calls me and asks why he can't work. I ask her if she went to a restaurant and found out a cook hadn't proven he was clear from having swine flu, would she eat there? She saw my point. But it's not his fault she threw away the note. They were remodeling. I asked, why can't the dog write a new one? Well, he went on vacation. Couldn't the receptionist or a PA get them something? She huffed and hung up on me. The next day he puts on Facebook, Dear Chipotle and managers, instead of cutting hours on someone, why not grow the freaking balls to fire them outright? Suck my dingaling. Pretty easy to let him go after that. I got fired from an internship for posting on Reddit before. It was a very small environmental engineering consulting firm. We were doing work on a site that had lead and arsenic contamination on it. The site was very dusty, and if it didn't rain for a few days, the dust would often kick up and blow onto the street next to the site, which happened to be the main road in this semi-smallish town. Someone mentioned on Reddit, in a totally unrelated way, that they were from this town. I made a mention of the contamination and told the dude that if he ever saw dust coming off the site that he should contact the engineers which were housed above one of the local bars. Apparently, this guy didn't really want the site to be redeveloped at all because of the already high congestion in the surrounding roads, and he called and complained and mentioned my post on Reddit. The company was so small, it was obvious it was me who posted it, and I fessed up about what I had said, and immediately deleted the post. Even though I didn't do anything illegal or even remotely immoral, I was fired because I was seen as a liability. Screw that. People deserve to know if the dust they're breathing in could give them cancer. I moved on to a different field, marine biology, and haven't even remotely looked back. Content warning, good old-fashioned racism ahead. A girl I know was a nurse at a hospital and got fired for posting things on Facebook such as, "So sleepy here in the ICU. Will someone please code and give me something to do? Hashtag, is that bad? I'm not trying to offend anyone, but I have to ask. Is it like a Native American custom not to take a dump at home? Is it like an offense to their husbands to dump at home? Every time I go into a public bathroom and it smells like someone died in there, a native is washing their hands. Literally every single time. Like, lay off the Navajo tacos." The dumbest part about it was she was tagging the hospital she worked at in her posts. If you have to start your post with, "I'm not trying to offend anyone, but," there's a good chance you're probably going to offend someone. Or just straight up be offensive under the guise of asking questions. I remember hearing a story about a young teacher in my province getting fired for posting vacation pictures to Facebook. Bikini, margaritas. A dipstick parent or teacher reported it, as any uptight group of PTA mothers would want to defend young eyes from that. "Oh, we can't have our children gazing upon such heresy. Having fun, enjoying yourself, it brings torment to the soul. Oh!" I didn't get fired, but I did get written up for a post on Facebook. It was about 5 years ago at my old job. Spring just started, and it was the first day it was in the 60s. On lunch, I posted something like, "What a beautiful day. Can't wait to get out of work and enjoy it." Well, that didn't go over well. Funny thing is, I wasn't Facebook friends with anyone from work. They had one guy that would creep on people's Facebooks. This is when I learned about privacy settings. He told the boss, and I got pulled in the office. They basically asked why I didn't like my job and why I couldn't wait to get out of work. I was like, it's the first warm day in what feels like 6 months. Of course I want to be outside. The reason I got written up was because I was, quote, on Facebook at work, even though I was on lunch. Bunch of idiots worked at that place. It's kind of surprising how delusional bosses are. "Oh no, he might want to get off work and enjoy a nice day. Call him in! We must investigate what it means to be human!"
Have you ever found yourself in a very dangerous situation suddenly easily solved by someone else? 2 days ago, I was picking up my lunch at McDonald's. It was rush hour, so I'm just searching for a free seat, and I found one near to a huge guy, suit-dressed. He was not fat, just huge. So I'm eating and just looking absently at people in the room, thinking about my job, my life, and banging, of course. I saw the usual folks you'd expect to find at a fast food. Suits, moms and kids, guys, and the omnipresent D-bag. Hat, tank top, overdeveloped biceps, tattoos, absurd tan. You know, the Jersey Shore kind of stereotype. The D-bag was with his female trophy. Great body, but her face was ugly as a kick in the mouth. Jesus Christ, I can't find words to say how she was ugly. She reminded me of Picasso. So I continue looking around while eating, and I may have crossed my look with the D-bag and his trophy a couple of times for nanoseconds. The giant rose, and while he was picking his tray, the D-bag yelled at me, "What are you looking at?" I was like, me? The D-bag stood up and yelled at me again, "What the frick are you looking at?" Suddenly, the giant, with the tray in one hand, turns around to see what's happening and approaches the D-bag, puts one hand on his chest and slams him back into his seat, then points a finger at him and says, "Shut the frick up, idiot." The giant takes a quick look at the girl, turns back to me and says, "Yeah, man, what are you looking at here? Just a fake chest, nothing more." Another quick angry look at the D-bag, then the giant proceeds to the trash can with his tray. The D-bag grabs his mortified girl and quickly rushes to the door, and I'm still at the table with a Coke in my hand and the WTF look unchanged. Don't know exactly how that happened, don't know who the giant was, but my Big Mac was a little cold, that's all. Well, I think we can agree that every man in this story, including the author, is a terrible person and move on to the rest. I worked as a chef in a very nice restaurant in Cleveland, Ohio in the mid-1980s. I was located near a very bad neighborhood and some of our dishwashers lived in that neighborhood. I was a young, white kid from the suburbs and one of the dishwashers was a black man in his late 30s named Harold, who went by Hurl. No idea why. Anyway, Hurl and I became friends. He was a rather jovial guy and he was interested in cooking, so I taught him a few things and eventually got him promoted from dishwasher to cook. He was actually quite good and loved the new job, and me for helping him out. One day he asked me if I wanted to go out and party with him after work. Being young and adventurous, I took him up on his offer and into the neighborhood we went. For those of you familiar with Cleveland, it was the Howe Avenue neighborhood. We eventually ended up in an after-hours club, which is where all the drunk people ended up when all the bars were closed. I was wandering around a smoke-filled room with lots of very seedy-looking people, and I was quite drunk myself at the time. I ended up in a corner somewhere, surrounded by a small gang of people wondering who I was. They started closing in on me, and one of them asked if I had $1 I could give him. I felt my skin get clammy, and I realized I was about to get jacked by some drunk guys in a bad neighborhood. Suddenly, Hurl shows up, looks at the guy asking me for $1, and says, "He with me." Hurl has a look on his face I've never seen before, a lot more menacing than anyone in the gang surrounding me. The gang immediately changes their tune and suddenly I'm their friend, and one of them asks me if I'd like a beer, and offers me one he has been drinking. I respectfully decline and Hurl and I move away. Hurl looks at me, still with that menacing look, and says, "Anyone come up to you in this hood, you tell them you with Hurl. They know me, and they know I don't play. Good to know." This was in Karachi, Pakistan in the late 90s. We were at my uncle's place who was renovating his house. He had a small cement mixer set up behind the house, which was taking up some of the alley. Usually, when someone is building a house, the cops will show up and say the mixer is illegal and ask for a bribe to turn a blind eye. Problem is, on this particular day, pretty much all the cops started showing up one by one. Each one would say, "Pay us more and no one else will bother you." And a few minutes later, a new police van would show up saying the same thing. We had enough and stopped paying them. This teed off one of the cop vans and a couple of officers showed up at our door. We kids opened it and the officer asked us to come with him. He took us to the end of the valley where 5 to 6 cops were standing, AK-47s drawn. We all crapped bricks while the officer kept saying, "Why won't your parents pay? Why won't your parents pay?" Things were not looking good. Luckily, one of our neighbors saw the cops rounding up kids and walking us away. He was a big shot in a major gang. He left his house, got on his motorbike and drove over to where we were stood. Told the cop, "Let them go, if you know what's good for you." The cops left. No one bothered us again until the construction was done. Another Karachi story in the same vein. Every now and again there's a general strike in Karachi, which is enforced by local gangs. By enforced, that means they'll gun down anybody who leaves their houses. It's not always that bad, but this is the threat. During one of these strikes, my uncle's aunt, not the same uncle as the last story, fell sick and had to be taken to hospital, which was right around the corner from my uncle's place. You could walk to it. My uncle was at the hospital all day looking after her and decided to head home in the afternoon. Streets were deserted and he made haste. When he was literally 20 meters from his home, a gang of bikers saw him, chased him and cornered him. They asked why he was out during the strike and he tried explaining. They'd have none of it. They had their weapons leveled at him while he backed up against the gate to his neighbor's home. He banged at their metal gate for help, but who the hell would come out in that situation? Suddenly, a car drives by, black with tinted windows. A window rolls down and says, "Let this one go." Bikers left. Uncle sprinted for his house, got in, and started shaking uncontrollably. And that's how we found him, and he told us this story. Chef-related story. My mother and father used to own a restaurant in San Francisco. It was south of Market at a time when that was an exceptionally bad area. They hired this really nice Mexican guy, Juan, to wash dishes and do work in the kitchen. They were, however, down a chef, the previous one quit all of a sudden, and hired this new guy on short notice. So it's the first day, the restaurant starts to fill up for lunch around 11:30 or so. Normally a number of dishes would be prepped for the first few people coming in for lunch. But this guy, in spite of his frantic running around the kitchen, had nothing ready. So my mother walks into the kitchen and says, "Hey, what's the deal?" The guy tells her aggressively that he's getting the stuff ready. Wait another 40 minutes, still no one had gotten their meals. My mother walks back into the kitchen and this guy reels around with a butcher knife, walks up to her and waves it in her face, says, "Get the frick out of my kitchen." The next thing, Juan, who'd been watching this exchange, bends down to his boot, pulls out a carving knife, grabs the chef by the throat, and pushes him up against the stove. The guy drops the butcher knife and pretty much craps himself. He then runs out of the restaurant, swearing everyone to heck. My mother, after crying a few minutes, realizes that she's screwed because she has no one to cook lunches for the 70 or so people waiting. Juan says, "Do not worry," puts on an apron and cooks up all the lunches with lightning speed. And they were great lunches. I had one of them. The chef came back a few weeks later apologizing. He said it had a really bad white snow habit that he was now dealing with. Juan was employed from that day on as head chef. Good old Juan. Total bamf. I don't miss working with some chefs and the insane substance-induced problems that would arise because of those particular guys. I got cornered for a beating in a new high school surrounded by about 20 kids. This one kid who I met a day earlier casually walked along a fence rail through the crowd and swiftly kicked the lead kid in the face. End of story. Saved me from a beating like he was James Dean. Never got to thank him. A guy who was harassing me in a bar got ejected. I learned he waited outside to attack me. Another patron apparently witnessed what went on in the bar, saw the guy laying for me, and sucker punched him. When I was about 14, it was summer and we lived by the sea. My dad had a dinghy in the loft from the 70s along with paddles, and me and a guy called Peter H. took it out down the beach. Minus paddles. Bad idea. We went with Peter's brother and were carefree messing about in the dinghy when we realized we were drifting out to sea. We got out, started paddling and trying to swim back and couldn't touch the bottom. We kept trying in vain and in the end realized we were screwed. This was the northeast coast of England in the North Sea. Temperature was about 4 degrees. We shouted to his brother on the beach, now about 150 meters away, to get help. Unbelievably, some guy walking on the beach stripped down to his pants and swam out. Dropped everything and swam out. He came to us, grabbed the boat that we were clinging to, and swam us back to shore. We got dry next to some fishing boats and lent him a towel before saying thanks. I genuinely believe he got us out of a lot of trouble, and I never even got to find out his name. I was working in a specialty running shoe and vitamin store, and this guy came in and walked around for a while, just kind of looking at different things. Said he didn't need help when I asked him about it. About 15 minutes later, when the store clears out, he comes up to the front counter and pulls out a fairly large knife and demands the money out of the cash register. Being 17 at the time and feeling a half panic, half anger, I started to talk loudly. "All right, I'll give you the money, don't hurt me," hoping that the cashier at the store next to mine would hear and call the police. The walls were thin and would mess with each other as such. My dad's friend is a cop in the town and every so often will randomly show up at work to mess with me. Sometimes this comes in the form of pretending to do a SWAT raid through the back door, which was directly behind the register. I don't lock the door while I'm working, so my boss usually just stopped by 2 to 3 times to walk in and check something and leave. This time, my dad's friend just strolls in yelling something about terrible service and what a bad employee I am. Sees the guy with the knife out and pulls out his service weapon. Guy drops knife, gets arrested. The one day I'm incredibly happy that my dad's friend comes in to screw with me. That must have been confusing for everyone that heard that. "Man, this service is terrible. Get to the ground! You're under arrest!" I was at Pismo Beach in California, about 13 years old at the time, boogie boarding and not really paying attention to the fact that the current had been pushing me closer and closer to the pier. I guess I figured when I start getting too close, I could just easily swim away and that would be that. When I realized that I was going to be slammed into the mussel and fishing hook encrusted pillars soon if I didn't start moving away, I began to swim the opposite direction. This is when I realized that swimming against the current is much harder than swimming with it. I started paddling furiously and began panicking because I wasn't making any progress. With each wave, I was being pushed closer to the pier. It would just be a couple more cycles before I started bouncing around underneath the pier. That's when I noticed a man standing in the water next to me. It was about waist deep. Feeling like an idiot, I slid off my board, stood up, and walked to shore. When I was in high school, I worked at the local video store. It was a small town and everyone knew one another. Anyway, these 2 thuggish black guys who were the main smack or white snow dealers for the hood would come into the store once a month and intimidate me into getting rid of their late fees because they never bought anything back on time. My boss finally caught on and told me that I couldn't do that anymore, no matter how scary they were. So they show up a week later expecting me to waive their fees. I explained to them that I could potentially get fired, but I would do it for them one last time. They actually understood and were appreciative. As they were walking out, they gave me their pager number and said that if I ever needed anything, to call them, and I assumed they meant I could call them for green herb, white snow, or whatever else they dabbled in. So I just kind of ignored it and went about my life. Flash forward a few months and I'm hooking up with this girl who had just broken up with her super redneck boyfriend. Mr. Redneck was not pleased when he found out about the situation. He showed up at the video store one night with some moron friends and informed me they would be waiting for me in the parking lot and they were going to beat the crap out of me after I closed the store for the evening. I still had several hours before close, and as time went by, several more truckloads of rednecks showed up. I was really starting to sweat. There were 15 to 20 dudes just waiting to teach me a lesson. It seemed there was no way to get out of this beating. Out of sheer desperation, I paged the scary drug dealer guys. They called me back pretty quickly. I explained what was going on and asked if they could help me out. They told me not to worry, they'd be there shortly. I didn't know what to expect. I continued my closing duties while I waited for them to show up. Once I turned the lights off to the store, the mob in the parking lot started getting riled up. They were yelling and taunting me through the windows. I had run out of things to do in the store, and the dudes I had paged still hadn't shown up. As I was setting the alarm and mentally preparing for a demoralizing butt-whooping, a procession of hoop ties pull into the parking lot and circle the trucks. I watched from the windows as the dealers and their friends pulled out guns and told the rednecks in no uncertain terms that I was not to be messed with. To this day, I have never seen people scramble so fast. There were literally tire marks in the parking lot from all of the trucks peeling out to get away. This one event led to me never being screwed with again by anyone in my hometown. It was pretty nice. I could talk all the crap I wanted with impunity since everyone was so scared of those guys. Good times. In conclusion, multiple rednecks wanted to beat the crap out of me over a girl, and scary substance dealers saved me. I wonder if he resumed waiving their late fees after that particular incident. Car wreck on my way to school a few years ago. My little Honda Civic versus a large semi-truck. I blacked out for a short period. When I realized what happened, I couldn't get my car door open. The window on my side was slightly open from the crash, and I started panicking, thinking the car is going to explode or something. Random stranger next to the car goes, "Calm down, try the other door." So I climb over the center console and get out of the car. How about a non-human stranger? I was about 8 or 9 walking home from school. About a block from my house, some random pit bull runs up to me and starts growling. Scared the crap out of me. I figure I'm at death's door when out of nowhere another dog came to my aid. I believe it was a German Shepherd. This dog ran to my side and started barking at the pit bull until it left. I don't know this dog and I don't believe I ever saw him or her again. It was a pretty surreal situation. No crap, the exact same thing happened to me. We had a German Shepherd Husky mix, greatest dog in the world, and one day I was playing outside on my big wheel or something when the neighbor's pit bull came running after me. Sebastian came out of nowhere and tackled the other dog before it could get to me. He ended up getting pretty hurt, needing stitches and whatnot, but he scared the pit bull back to the neighbors and most likely saved my life and my face. My parents say that from that point on, he never let me or my siblings out of sight when we were outside. I was riding a bus in Brooklyn. I was trying to get some new bus routes instead of the subway because they could often be faster. I was going up into a very rough part of Brooklyn, basically Eastern Bedford, Stuyvesant. I was going to where the bus crossed the subway line. I'm the only white guy on a bus full of black people, which in itself was not unusual. An old guy sitting on the bus walks over to me and says, "You need to get off the bus now. You can't go further. It's not going to end well for you." I don't know if he saw something specific or was speaking in general. He was sincere. I got off the bus and walked a few blocks to catch a transfer from there. My family and I were the only ones on a deserted beach in Florida. I was being stupid and about 11, decided to swim a little far from the beach and get caught by an undertow. I remember the desperate, futile feeling of swimming harder towards land but seeing it get further and further away. Since only now my family was there and my parents weren't good at swimming, I was a goner. Out of nowhere came a strong swimmer, told me to calm down, gave me a flotation device, and swam me back to the beach. Before I could properly thank him, he disappeared. I had recently moved to the Columbia Heights neighborhood in northwest DC a few years ago, and for those who don't know, the Columbia Heights was really bad about 10 years ago, but is in the process of gentrifying. The neighborhood is pretty culturally and racially diverse, and I could afford it. One day I was walking home from work and was about 2 blocks from my house, but slightly off the beaten path on a mostly empty street. I had my earbuds, which isn't always the safest thing to do, just because you can lose situational awareness. I also had a laptop bag with no laptop, which again isn't all that smart. Anyway, a dude is walking toward me on the sidewalk and is around my age. We make eye contact and he says something unintelligible to me and I say something like, "Sorry," assuming I was either in his way or he was begging. I notice he has bloodshot eyes and if I had to guess, this was probably a smackhead. I angle my body towards him as we pass each other and the next thing I know he is grabbing for my earbuds. He pulls them out of my ears but doesn't quite get them as I jump back. I'm sort of in shock, but I've been in fights before, but not when I had no build-up to the moment. I think I yelled something like WTF, and as he was coming at me again, I was thinking I probably could take the guy, but I should try to avoid blood, hitting his teeth with my fists. I don't know why my first thought here was risk of hepatitis, rather than maybe that I should just run my butt away, which would have been much smarter. But as he comes at me again, some unseen man is in front of me and pushes the dude away. Smackhead then stands his ground, and damn if the man doesn't just push him again and then starts yelling at him to get the frick out of the neighborhood and berating him over and over. Smackhead turns toward Main Street and begins to move quickly away. The man is yelling, loudly, at him the whole time, echoing off the nearby houses. I'm kind of just staring at this point as the adrenaline is coursing through me. At that moment, suddenly a little girl, maybe 3 to 4 years old, on a tricycle rides past me in the same direction as the man, and the smackhead, opposite direction that I was heading. She is just following her daddy, the man who saved me, like it's the most normal thing in the world. Most surreal thing that I've ever experienced. I just sort of watch as the three of them head back to the main street. I never got a chance to say thanks. I was the stranger once, in Toronto at the Yonge and Egg subway stop, mother and her 2 kids standing fairly back from the edge. Trains coming in pretty fast when one of the kids bolts straight for the tracks, like an idiot. My back's turned, but I hear the mum scream. I turn around and see the kid out of the corner of my eye. On instinct, I grab him and happen to just get him right in the front of the shirt and hoist him about 5 feet off the ground in half a second, just as the train flies by with the horn blaring. It was pure luck, but I played it cool and handed him over to his mother, trying to sound suave. "Is this yours?" Raised eyebrow. Funny thing that she didn't even seem that grateful. Maybe the kid has prophesied to end the world or something, in which case I'd like to apologize to you all in advance. I didn't know. There's lots of mysterious strangers in the last few posts. One wonders if any of them are the same superhero. I was drinking with a friend and his younger brother. My friend had recently finished his enlistment from the Marines, and we were out celebrating. His younger brother ended up having words with a gangster white rapper wannabe. It escalates into, "Let's take this outside." We go out into the parking lot, more words and chest puffing. Mini Eminem pulls out a gun and points it at my friend's younger brother. I'm like, crap, and my butthole tightens up. However, my friend walks up to the guy, slaps him in the face, and says, "Put the piece away, you dumb idiot, and go home." Guy puts the gun up and leaves. I was doing a show at this wretched comedy club in Brockton, Massachusetts. There was a drunk chick who would not stop talking, so after a few polite back and forths, I say something along the lines of, "Will someone stick an eggplant in her mouth and shut her up?" Note, this is an old, crappy thing to say, but it usually works, and like I said, it was Brockton. That does the trick, and she's quiet for the rest of the show. I finish my set and come off stage. I'm walking out to the front room of the club, and suddenly I'm aware of an enormous shape coming toward me. It was the hosebag's boyfriend, and he's got like 8 inches and 100 pounds on me, and he's teed off. He shoves me into the front room and is doing a whole pre-fight, "Why you talking about my girl that way?" chest bump kind of thing when suddenly 3 dudes just kind of sweep into the room. They're all built like fire plugs and wearing matching skin-tight Adidas workout shirts like some kind of working-class superhero team. One of them closes the doors to the showroom and blocks them. Another goes and stands by the front door like he's standing guard or something, while the third gets between me and the big dude who says, "What the frick, man? You wanna fight?" And the guy says in the calmest, coldest voice, "Yeah, I do. Let's fight." Something in the way he says it totally takes the steam out of the big dude. He just backs right down like, "Nah, man, it's cool. We're all cool here." And then my mean little savior goes, "This guy was hilarious. Your girlfriend's a C-word, and you owe him an apology and a beer." And the big guy nods and goes and gets me a beer, before going back into the show with his tail between his legs. Turns out these guys were off-duty Brockton Vice cops. Totally saved my stupid moron self. What's the worst case of psycho overprotective parenting that you've ever seen? When I was doing freshman orientation years ago at college, the tour guide told a story when we got to the dorms. The head RA for a freshman dorm got a knock on her office door about 2-ish months into the first semester, right before midterms. A girl walked in and asked what was the longest amount of time guests were allowed to stay in the room. The RA told her, can't remember the amount of days, and the girl says that her roommate's mother has been living in the room since the move-in weekend. Holy frick, no. I went to a high school with a guy whose parents had a camera installed in his room that fed into a TV screen in their bedroom. When he told me, I assumed it was one of those things they used when he was a baby, then disabled when he was older. Nope. According to him, they still kept it on 24/7, even though he was like 17 years old. I've never been so creeped out. Holy crap! I'd stare at the camera and pleasure myself furiously to assert dominance. Reddit has ruined me. My aunt won't let her kids open their own soda cans because she thinks they'll cut their fingers off, which was fine when they were young, but they're 15 and 18 now. When I attended private school, K-8, we weren't allowed to have soda cans. The reason was the principal had a student at her previous school get hit in the mouth with a kickball while drinking and sliced their lips. One freak, isolated accident, and no one's allowed soda cans. WTF. Sodas were allowed up until that witch came to school. It was a Catholic school, and that principal was your stereotypical nun who ran around the school with a bullhorn, yelling at students all day. A girl I know didn't get the talk from her parents until she was 18 or 19. Her mum had decided that if she didn't know what that was, she would keep her virginity forever or something like that. Now, Sally, this is what people do when they really love each other. Oh, Billy and I do that all the time. Girl at school wasn't allowed any sugar, no sweets, not even fruit. It was weird. I invited her to a party at mine, and her parents came round before the party to check our house was safe. They asked if our gate locked to keep people out. It wasn't fair on her, though. Every birthday or party, she'd eat tons of junk food and feel ill, and she used to crawl around the classroom pretending she was a cat. I think they broke her. Oof. I hope you recovered someday, young cat lady. I wonder if she was diabetic or something, or if the parents were just straight-up Fruit Loops. My wife's mother. Too many acts of lunacy to mention, but the one that sticks out was when we went to their house for the family barbecue. We were in our mid-20s. Mum decides to start a fight over my presence, as I wasn't family, and thus should not be attending. Wife says, if he's not welcome, we're leaving. Mum says, no you're not, you're grounded. Wife just gives her this tilt-your-head sideways look and says, we're going back to our house. I know someone who has just moved into her college dorm a couple of weeks ago. This girl has never had a house key as her mum wouldn't allow it. If she wanted in the house, mum better be there. Her parents also have all of her social media passwords, and her mum openly states she used to go and read the chat conversations. Not as bad as others, however the girl has already been home one weekend and is set to come back in a few weeks. We're all wondering how she'll rebel once she's under the college experience. This girl's brother, who's in middle school, maybe just starting high school, is worse. He is so coddled that he freaked out when he was left in a waiting room at a doctor's office alone, while his uncle went back for his appointment. The kid could not be left alone. For the record, neither kid is special needs. Around the middle of my first semester of college, I lost my phone. I noticed it was missing around when I got back to my dorm. Thinking that I left it in one of my classrooms, I called for it from a friend's phone. A classmate who lives off campus had found it. He took it home because he knew it was mine and was going to give it back next Monday during class. And that was that. I would get my phone on Monday, so problem solved. Boy, was I wrong. Because he turned off the phone after that call, my mother couldn't get a hold of me. My mum, being my mum, assumed I was dead in a smack house after doing too many substances. The lunatic took a plane and flew from Panama to DC just so she could check I was doing okay. Halfway across the continent just so she could ask one question. Keep in mind my best friend and 4 other high school friends were attending the same college as me and lived in the same dorm building as me, and she had all their phone numbers. Also, to make matters worse, this was not the last time she took an 8-hour flight just to make sure I was okay. My first roommate in college was extremely coddled by his mother, or at least I thought so. His home was about an hour away from campus, and she came up every day to get his laundry and make his bed, clean his side of the room. They were both neat freaks, and I wasn't a slob by any means, but I wasn't quite as neat as either of them would have liked. What ended up happening is I would come back from my class and find her making my bed, organizing my desk, and picking up my dirty clothes. Didn't really appreciate that, but I didn't want to make waves, so I just kept my mouth closed. Finally, it got really weird when I came back after a class had gotten cancelled and they were both in the same twin bed. He was sleeping and she was stroking his hair and face and singing him a lullaby. Wife grew up in a quiverful family. She was only allowed to wear ankle-length skirts, no movies at any time, only parental-approved books. Pilgrim's Progress, the Bible, theology books, no music except for classical and hymns. In order to date her, I had to court her. That involved never being alone, her parents inviting themselves to our anniversary dinners, siblings repeating every word that we said back to her parents, I gave her a goodbye hug and her mother yelled at her, calling her a whore and a loose woman. Finally, she gave up and ran away. They chased her to her car screaming and tried to block her in the driveway with a tractor. My first boyfriend in high school practically lived at our house because my mother refused to let me go to his. He was over every day after school and most weekends. Finally, I convinced her to let me drive myself to his house. At this point, I had met his dad twice, and his dad thought he did something to offend or scare me off because I never came to visit them. I really wanted to go out and hang out with him and his dad, so I drove myself to his house with the condition that I call my mother immediately upon arrival from their phone. Google Maps said it should take 8 minutes to get there. 8 minutes and 45 seconds later, I get an enraged phone call from my mum. I was just walking in the door and I hadn't called her yet. She made me immediately return home and grounded me from my cell phone for a month. The parents from these stories are the kind of people who go on murderous rampages when their children inevitably rebel, aren't they? I had an ex-boyfriend from high school whose parents were very strict about him dating. So we always had group dates, we weren't allowed to be alone, we went over to his house for a movie night and everyone all of a sudden left. But it was super late and my dad's place was across town. So I called for him to pick me up, but it was going to take 45 minutes to get there. His parents made me wait outside on the porch alone in November in Canada. It was cold. He wasn't allowed to wait outside with me. They didn't even let me wait in the foyer with them supervising. Well, girls who've frozen to death can't get pregnant, I guess. My mother signed me out of high school, and I was not allowed to go out of the house for almost 2 years. She quit her job and was convinced the Asian mafia was going to kill us. I wasn't allowed near windows, to get the mail, nothing. But my siblings came and went as they pleased. To this day, I do not understand. You were obviously the favorite. Congrats! I got one. My sister once told me about this one time when she was at a beach house with her friends. They were all over 20 years old and they were planning to stay there the weekend. Obviously, they were going to stay up all night watching movies when midnight strikes. This one girl's phone starts to ring and it was her mother telling her to go to sleep. Worst part? She silently stood up and went to bed. She's over 20 years old. I had a 9 p.m. bedtime at 17. I had to get up at 8 a.m. the next day. So for 11 hours a day, I was supposed to be in bed asleep. It drove me nuts. Getting up early was also a big no-no because I woke her up. I wasn't allowed to leave my room for anything either. It was hell. It took months of her screaming at me and me talking as calmly as I could while she hit, screamed, trashed my room and my schoolwork before she would let me stay up as long as I wanted. The school ended up getting involved because I went from an A student to a D in a matter of months because I just couldn't get all of my work done. I worked on the weekends and was training 4 nights a week as well. Made getting all my work done difficult when after school I was supposed to clean the house, eat dinner, then go straight to training. I work security at a college, so I've seen my fair share. This wasn't so much overprotective as it was babying. I once had a mother call our office. The exchange went as following. Mother: hello? Can you please tell my son's professor that he won't be in class today? He doesn't feel well. Me: where is your son? Oh, he's there, on campus in the dorms. Ma'am, I don't know who your son's professor is, and even if I did, it's his responsibility to get in touch with them, not mine or yours. Oh, I know, but he called me and asked me to call him out of class. He's in college now. He's 18, he can do this on his own. He doesn't even need to call, he emails his professor. Ha! Oh, you're so right. I had a friend growing up whose mum refused to send a Christmas card with her and her brother's photos on it. The mum was convinced at the end of the season, once people threw away the cards, the garbage man or anyone rifling through the trash would see her amazing beautiful children, find the address on the discarded envelope, and come kidnap the kids from their home. She did many other bizarre things, but that one always stuck out to me. I frickin' hate when parents do this. It's extremely overprotective and kids need to be exposed to the world. Besides, I tend to return the kids when I'm done with them. Sincerely, the garbage man. In all seriousness, the level of paranoia to imagine that people are digging through your trash specifically to get the rare thrown-out photos of children who sent the card from a different house is an extreme level of delusion. On my friend's 13th birthday, his big brother was taking us paintballing. We said goodbye to his mum. She was, in full disclosure, a severe paranoid schizophrenic who liked to go off her meds. Anywho, we left the house and headed to paintball. At a random gas station a good half hour away, we stopped for snacks. When the older brother goes inside, the mum pulls up to a screeching halt next to us, rolls down the windows and starts yelling at us to make sure the older brother spends all the money on paintball, rocking the crazy eyes the whole time. She leaves by rolling around to the back of the gas station and idling there. When the older brother got back, we told him what was going on. He told us to buckle up. Sure enough, we pulled out of the gas station and she starts to try tailing us. I say try because next thing I know we're on the freeway doing at least 100, dodging from lane to lane till we found a quick off-ramp that took us under a bridge where we hid for a few minutes to make sure we'd lost her. The older brother refused to let her ruin my friend's 13th birthday. He was a good dude. There's two major things that we older brothers have to do. 1. Annoy your siblings. 2. Make sure no one else F's with your siblings. My ex's mum screamed in my face, legit inches away from my face, that I was stealing her son away when he bought his house. It was his decision to buy a house and he had wanted me to live with him. The location of the house, you ask? Directly across the street from where his parents live. Was his name Raymond, and did everybody love him? My former roommate's parents were extremely protective of them. Once I woke up to 3 calls and 4 texts from her mum asking if my roommate was in the room. I replied back, yes. Later that day, my roommate explained to me that there was a girl murdered in North Carolina that fit her description and her parents wanted to make sure she was alive. We go to school over 400 miles away from North Carolina. I don't know about the worst since my parents were pretty good about other stuff, but anything to do with adult fun times was a major no-go. I remember them trying to give the talk to my oldest sister, who was about 8 or 9 at the time, making me 4 or 5. We got to the part where the guy puts the thing he pees out of into a hole that I was not aware existed, and I ran away screaming. That subject was never revisited. They pulled me out of middle school adult education because it was too early and my high school taught abstinence. I thought that all adult flicks, not just those ones starring children, were illegal until college. My friend's mum. They're great people and I love them like a second family, but she was overprotective. 4th grade, his mum cut the tail off the Nightcrawler action figure I got him for his birthday for being demonic. 5th grade, she throws away the medieval Spawn action figure I got him for being Spawn. High school, she throws away the vintage Faster Pussycat shirt I gave him. His dad's cool though. He'd watch Beavis and Butthead with us when we were 10. I once dated a girl with absolutely insane parents. Throughout middle school and high school, they refused to let her go out to anything but school and choir trips. She had to argue and bargain with them for months just to be able to go to senior prom. They wouldn't let her go to junior prom. They also refused to let her get a driver's license or a car to limit her mobility. Even to this day, they refuse to let her go out. She, a 20-year-old woman, has to get permission from her super restrictive mum and dad to go out for coffee at the cafe downstairs. The worst part of it all is that she can't move out as they have hold of her passport and where she lives. It's more or less impossible to get anything done without it. On the legality of withholding her passport, I don't know for sure whether it is or not. The laws where I lived sometimes had really backwards policies. I've advised her to try to take action or escape many times, but for personal reasons, she's decided not to. I disagree entirely with her choice, but it's her choice to make, not mine. I graduated high school a year and a few months ago. A good friend of mine was a freshman in my senior year. Now she's a junior and taking college classes at my college. She's not allowed to talk to me because I graduated. She still does in person, but not as much as we used to be able to. There are a lot more stories of these sorts of relationships continuing into adulthood than I would have expected. How about you? When I was in college, I was dating a girl and had been for some time. My dad lived in another state and we had made plans to go visit him, so she could meet him for the first time. The day we were supposed to leave, like 2 hours before we left town, she got her grades from her college. They weren't as good as her parents wanted, so they grounded her. I went to her house to try and reason with her mum. I should have bailed at that red flag, but I was in love, and her mum was so condescending. I explained how my dad and stepmom had made arrangements for her to be there, and how excited they were to meet her. She wouldn't hear it. I made the mistake of saying, "I understand that you're upset, but deciding this right before the trip just seems childish." I was banned from their house. We were actually together for a really long time after that, but I know they're still really overprotective and she's really dependent on them. She's 31 and the last time I talked to her, a few months back, she still lived with them. My boss has a baby and a 4-year-old, and they are super overprotective. Like, the 4-year-old still sleeps in their bed with them and the baby, and they haven't left either kid alone with another person ever. Sometimes he talks about how they've never been out since the kids. Like, I can relate. I have a pair myself, but we still live our lives. The 4-year-old went to preschool, so the mum went with him and sat in the class every day, and even sat at his table and played with him instead of letting him interact with his peers. One time they were in the office and my boss hand-fed him food because he didn't want the kid handling the food himself since the kid had recently touched their computer. Recently, he was describing their garden and how the food at the back never gets picked because we can't go back there ever because of the baby, you know? No, I have no idea. You lived on a small fenced lot in the suburbs. What are you afraid of getting to your baby if you walk out to the corner of your yard? The worst part is he's constantly telling me how tired he is and how his kids never sleep. But it's probably because they're all sleeping in the same bed, waking each other up all the time. Both my kids were in their own room by a couple of months old, and it made life so much easier. When they're in the room with you, you notice every little noise. I was TAing a general chemistry lab in college, and a parent emailed me after the first lab report with an annotated copy of the graded assignment I gave, which was a B+. Little Johnny had never gotten a B in class before, and I was being unfair since it was his first semester in college. Long story short, she threatened to go to the professor. I said go ahead, and they did. The professor was awesome. When kids whine and moan about their grades, he offers them a regrade, and then goes over the report with a fine-toothed comb. The B+ got changed to a C. The student was the one who ultimately asked for the regrade. Would he have asked for one if his parents didn't make a stink? Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't matter. Part of being in college is learning to take responsibility for your actions. And there's a reason professors rely on TAs for grading freshman lab assignments. Their time and attention is better spent elsewhere. Asking the professor for a personal regrade must carry downside risk. Otherwise, everyone would ask for one every time. Please feel free to question the grader on anything. That's part of their job too. Just make sure you have a solid case before requesting a formal regrade. A friend of mine had a very overprotective and religious set of parents. He didn't have a door on his bedroom or bathroom. When you went over there, you had to take your shoes and socks off. I understand shoes, but how are socks any more dirty than bare feet? He never got dropped anywhere either. Always had to be mum or dad there. I think the scariest part of that to me and some of the other commenters was the lack of a door on a bathroom. Seriously, WTF? Yes, I've been waiting for this. So I met my wife on OkCupid. We were about 21 at the time. I came into her life at a very bad moment. She was failing classes, anxiety-prone, etc. Eventually, she got asked to take a leave of absence from her school. Against my better advice, she didn't tell her parents. Went back to the school to pack up her stuff and figure out what her next move was. Well, her parents found out within that next day or so, and her dad flew some odd 1,000 miles to get her and go back home. But this was the next thing. They cut her off from the world. She couldn't go outside the house unless it was to the schools that they enrolled her in to get her back in good standing. She dropped off the face of the earth. Her mum spent time writing all of her friends, pretending to be her, stating that they could not be friends and that she was just moving on with her life. Her mum did the same to me. Eventually I got a hold of her and we had to talk secret for months on end. We started dating and she graduated and we kept talking. Well, she finally moves out of her parents' house and comes to visit me some 1,000 miles away. Her parents cut her cell phone off. When she gets back to her hometown, they demand she comes over. They confiscate some items of hers that I gave her and told her to never speak to me again. That doesn't work, of course. Eventually we say screw it because they're bat crap crazy. We're talking the mother mailing me that she knew who many managers were and she could call them and let them have some fricking craziness. And then we got married. When we finally tell them, which is like a month or two after it happens, the mum played the victim like we didn't even get her the chance to get to know me and to like me. And I'm just like, B-word! You impersonated your daughter and told me that you wanted nothing to do with me. Your daughter told you that we would be together, and you threatened to disown her. As you could see, this completely works me up. Nonetheless, now the mother refuses to speak with either of us, has manipulated the ballless father into not speaking with his own child, and the teenaged younger sister thinks that my wife is the world's most awful person for choosing to live her life. For frick's sake. Educators, have you ever had a real genius in class? What made him or her so smart? When I was student teaching, I had a work-study gig at a wraparound program in my city. It was half tutoring, half daycare for students that needed a place to go between that time when school ended but before their parents got home. While it was mostly populated by middle and high school students, there were a handful of very young children as well, 5 to 6 years old. One very little girl, she couldn't have been older than 6, was probably 5, approached me with a box of chess. She didn't know how to play, but said her father played and she wanted to learn how. I'm not a chess expert, but I've played a good amount of times and read a few books, and I can beat my friends or a hard computer. To clarify that, I'm talking about the hard setting on my phone. It's about 1500 ELO. I'm somewhere above that, but probably not by much. I met with this little girl for about 30 minutes every day. In 2 days, she understood all the rules and could play competently. At the end of the week, she tied the game in a stalemate. At the end of the second week, I never won again. Turns out she was the daughter of a professor at my college, and he was an internationally ranked chess player. When I ran into him, he couldn't thank me enough for teaching his daughter chess, as his wife had issued a decree that he wasn't allowed to teach or play or mention chess around their daughter. Understandable, didn't want to pressure her or discourage her. Chess was in these people's genes, man. I teach a university-level writing course for people who typically aren't in writing-heavy majors, math, science, etc. It's hard to make a 100 in a writing course for anyone, because even great writers do something wrong in papers sometimes. A missing citation, argument could be more nuanced, rushed through conclusion, etc. All mistakes that will at least take you from a 100 to a 98 or something. This kid made a stone-cold 100 on every paper. Like, I literally couldn't find anything wrong in any of them. That is bizarre for even great writers. I've never felt more worthless as a teacher because there was just nothing I could suggest to improve unless I started making stuff up. I found out later that he had a 100 in all of his classes that semester, including some really difficult upper-level STEM ones. I don't know if he was a genius, but he's probably the closest I've had, and I wonder if having a 99 average would feel like a disappointment to him. My ex taught primary school, and she gave her class a weekly spelling test and said anyone who bettered their score from last week would receive a chocolate. Most kids got 15 or above out of 20, except for one kid who got 0. She said all the other kids had made fun of him, as kids would, but he was strangely calm about it. Didn't get stressed from the teasing, as most kids would. Next test, he got 1. Same ordeal, but received a chocolate as per the rules. Next week 2, then 3, then 4, receiving a chocolate each week. I didn't fathom a 10-year-old kid could conduct something so cunning. This was an odd 15 years ago, wouldn't be surprised if he was super successful now. Smart kid, but I'm not sure that the right lesson was being taught to him. I have taught at university level for decades and have certainly come across some very smart kids. High success most often correlates with an element of obsession and work ethic. There are, however, 2 students out of the 10,000 plus I have taught who stand out. Student 1 was deeply obsessed with his area of study and just about anything else. He rarely went to the lectures he had signed up for and could be found sitting in the back of classes of every subject you could imagine. He was a socially very engaged person whose enthusiasm was exhausting. His final GPA was very mediocre, a fact that did not bother him in the slightest. He had no interest in the minutiae of undergraduate study. He was working at a PhD level and beyond in his final undergraduate year, sucking every bit of information out of his professors. He ultimately became a high-tech multimillionaire. Student number 2 may be what you're looking for and is the only example I've encountered. This was a very shy and humble young man who took a long time to get to know, but was very engaging once you did. He came from a working-class family with no history of higher education and worked long hours at McDonald's. The first thing I noticed was the truly extraordinary quality of his work, effortlessly solving problems that previous students had not even come close to solving. His ability to pick up complex ideas and even extend them was unrivaled. Other professors reported the same. Pressures of work and many other problems resulted in him not turning up to class often, but he would still ace the course. In his final term, he did not attend a single class of any subject. He simply turned up for the final exam and mid-term. He won the undergraduate gold medal for the university. He sadly now is socially dysfunctional, unemployed, and has been in trouble with the law. I always felt the system did not serve him well. I'm not sure about genius, but I'm currently teaching a very bright student in a class that is supposedly remedial. His home life is horrible and his behavior prevents a serious challenge. But he can skim my notes before a lesson and completely understand it. To keep him engaged, I will sometimes ask him to help me explain a concept, and he can do it just as well, if not sometimes better than I can. He's gotten a 100% on every test and quiz that we've had this year. I asked the principal why the student is in the class that he's in, and he said that administrators won't put him in advanced classes because his behavior is distracting others. I've recommended this student for advanced classes next year, and I have an assistant principal on my side now. We're working with him on his behavior, which has shown improvement, especially in the past few weeks. High school history teacher here. The genius student I had didn't open the textbook once, took very little notes, came to review sessions, yet sat attentively and answered every question I asked aloud correctly. Showed up to all my tests with just a pencil and would be first to finish nearly every time. Only question he ever got wrong was a bonus one in my first month of teaching that asked the students to correctly spell my last name, as the majority never call me anything but Miss. Fantastic all-round kid too. Athlete, in the musicals, social, loved by all. Got into every college he applied for. Michael was 7 when I met him, and what set him apart was his ability to direct his own learning, his well-rounded intelligence, and his genuine love of learning. He was in my 3rd grade class, and it was clear right away that he was smart. Could do any math we gave him, spell anything, reading on a higher level than we tested for. And I teach in a town that's pretty pretentious about its kids. Very high socioeconomic level, tons of kids go to Ivy Leagues, many parents think their kid is a genius. Michael's mum knew he was smart, but didn't seem to get how smart. But he was never the kind to show off or want to impress people. He loved learning and was so excited to share it with everyone. Some noteworthy things he did: taught himself about the stock market. His mum wouldn't let him invest money, so he invested theoretical amounts and then showed her what it would have earned. Came in with an autobiography of George Bush to read during the silent reading. Not a kid version, the official biography. He was able to tell me about it and commented that he disagrees with Bush politically, but felt bad for him because he thought he was pushed into politics by wanting to live up to his dad, but wasn't happy in it. Noticed some languages have similarities, so started mapping out how he thought they were related. This was in 2nd grade. In 3rd grade, he showed me his map and I told him about language family trees, and he was so excited. He got really into language isolates and wanted to learn Basque. Related to this, he made himself flashcards of Greek and Latin roots to help his spelling and vocabulary. Taught himself hexadecimal and binary and was working on other computer languages. He was incredibly socially intuitive and empathetic. He would say to me, "I think so-and-so is upset," and the kid in question would be fine. Inevitably, before the day ended, that kid would have a meltdown or ask to talk to me about an issue. I learned fast to trust Michael's judgment. This also made him a really great friend. He did it with me too. He'd ask if I was okay and I'd be having a really rough day. It was so strange but sweet to have this tiny kid say things like, "Let me know what I can do to support you today." Oh, and I've thought of another. He was also musically very gifted, taught himself some instruments, and could identify pretty obscure musical pieces by ear. He moved at the end of the year and I lost touch. It was so great getting to be his teacher. It's cheesy, but I learned so much about how to teach and support gifted students by working with him. As someone who basically speaks 1.5 languages despite working in both for many years, I'm incredibly envious of just this kid's talent for picking languages up. Wow. I'm a former teacher. Geniuses just know things. There's not much you can teach them in today's schools because they're so far ahead of the rest of the class that you can't teach them and the rest of the students at the same time. I had a student who reads books in class. If I asked her to explain what I had just said, she explained it perfectly without looking up from the book. Some students complained about her making A's while reading books in class while they listened and didn't make A's. I couldn't help that. She was bored in class. I could waste classes' time scolding her, or I could leave her alone. I teach French, and I think I currently have one in my French 4 class. This kid is insane. Knows stuff that I've never explicitly taught, demonstrated on in-class assessments, so no Google Translate happening here. She's also not the cheating kind of kid. She masters difficult grammatical concepts without even needing to practice them. All I have to say is, this is how and why you use the subjunctive, and she gets it. Perfectly. Every time. In speech, in writing, everything she does is meticulous, well thought out, and above and beyond what I ask for, and she's like this in every class. I have good students in my school, really good students, affluent district, but this girl absolutely takes the cake. Helps teach a student at another high school who is an extremely talented arts student. This kid has the ability to take something from concept to in front of you, in reality, in less than a few hours. He helped design and build an entire set for a play we did on a ridiculously small budget. What made him so smart is his ability to think through all of the logical steps of the process immediately. He figured out the potential problems before they happened and took steps to avoid them from the planning stages. To me, this is what makes someone an actual genius, the ability to understand and work through a problem quickly and effortlessly that most others struggle with. It is absolutely incredible just how wide the gap is between the lowest performer and the highest performer in a single classroom. I teach AP Physics, among other things, and one of my students got finished with his work in 1/4 of the time through the class and gave everyone at his table the answers just so he could talk with his friends about the particularly relative nature of mathematics. It was fantastic to see. At a table right next to his, I had a student ask me, "Why does NASA need money to build things if they're so important to build? Shouldn't they just build them?" Please support tracked learning. I mean, I think this kid just solved our national debt issue. We don't need to pay anyone. If the work is important, they'll do it. Not a genius per se, but I've had a few very gifted kids in my classes. Sometimes they're just naturally gifted or their parents push them or support them outside of school. Some want to learn as many new skills as possible and absorb all the information you give them. They can be left to work on something as long as it interests them. Others know they're capable of doing very well, but they don't care and slack off a bit because they know they can. It's very difficult to motivate these students sometimes. Sometimes they get bored by the work or don't want to write the reports that go with it. This can sometimes be a problem because most pieces of coursework require certain things which must be in it to receive a good grade, and they question the need for it. One very, very gifted girl I taught was an absolute pleasure to have in class. I remember doing a couple of things on the Nepal earthquakes when they happened last year. I was a geography teacher, and she wrote an absolutely outstanding essay on the impacts and everything, comparing it to some other examples, things like that. I think what really helped her to do so well was the fact that her parents were very, very supportive and nice people, also intelligent, and they kept just enough pressure on her to do well without being helicopter parents. She had a really positive attitude to school and academia in general and could see the value of everything she learned. I spoke to her English teacher after getting this incredible essay, and she said she was writing at a similar level then. By the way, she was 11 and writing at the sort of level and detail I'd expect from my 17 to 18-year-olds. Apparently she read a lot of books and was always just interested. Brilliant stuff. I actually learnt stuff from her on occasion, which was amazing and always made me smile. Anyway, I showed this essay to a member of senior management who thought after seeing it was plagiarism, but she wrote it there in front of me. I miss teaching when I think back to pupils like her. I think the most interesting kid I ever taught was during my teaching practice. He was a 14-year-old kid called David, not especially interested in school, preferring to be outside messing with his mates or playing football, but he had the most interesting style of writing I've ever come across. So articulate and mature, yet with a quirky, humorous edge to it that showed a real independence of thought. I loved reading his work. It's been 10 years since I taught him, and I've yet to come across another pupil of his quality. I only taught him for a few months before I moved to a different placement, but I did take him aside before I left to tell him that I thought he had a real talent he could pursue. There was something innate with him, a real natural flair and talent. Others have achieved great success through pure hard work and determination, but I wouldn't class them as geniuses. I think I'm going to echo the sentiment of many of the other commenters that I read while getting through these stories now. This is a slightly demoralizing read to some of us who didn't come out of the womb with a brain firing on all cylinders with talent in all subjects. Oh well. I don't know if I would say that she was a genius, but there is one student I always think about. This was at a school that is known for having some of the smartest students around, at least in the on-paper sense, that they had great grades and test scores. And this was a class that attracted a lot of the highest achievers, read pre-med requirement. She had the highest average for all of the regular graded work, labs, problem sets, exams, but there's only so far you can stand apart from the others with those, particularly at a school like that. What allowed me to be completely blown away by her was her research papers. This was one of those core courses that had multiple professors, so he had to standardize the material, and there was a standard rubric for how the students were supposed to write the research papers. What essential questions they should be answering along the way, how to do the primary literature research, and how to cite your sources. The papers I got almost always fell into one of two categories: the C or below papers and the A papers. The C papers were from the students who, for some reason, didn't really get it with the rubric and still wrote it like it was a high school paper where they were obviously just rewording what they read on Wikipedia, plus some light cut-and-paste plagiarism from the abstracts of papers they clearly never read, and not enough citations. The A papers were from students who simply followed the rubric to the letter. They answered every question in the paper consecutively as it was written in the rubric, cited their sources, always reading and using just enough papers to be sufficient, and no more, with the occasional sprinkling of the subtle cut-and-paste plagiarism. These papers were usually dull as crap, but often never had so much as a typo, so I pretty much had to give them an A, because they did what I asked them to do. I never liked including the research papers in this course. because the students were clearly not mature enough to really tackle the material in a productive way. They were fine freshman papers, but a waste of everyone's time in the end. Then, one day, I had this student in my class. She never followed the rubric and its dopey questions at all. She thought of her own questions for the topic, the ones that were the most interesting and relevant to that topic specifically. Many of these questions were truly insightful and open-ended as well. She went into the literature and really read and clearly understood these papers that should have been way over the head of any normal teenager college student. Then, on top of that, she would obtain the data from these papers and run her own different analyses using very complex methodologies that I didn't teach until the most advanced courses for seniors and graduate students. So she was clearly just teaching herself as she went along. Lastly, she was a terrific writer, maybe one of the best I've ever read. Her papers always came in way too long for the limit. Normally a sign the paper was an editing nightmare, and I loved reading them. She knew how long the paper needed to be to cover the topic, and my limits were just suggestions she chose to ignore, and rightfully so. She is the type of student I think should get an A, not the other I dotters and T crosses, but alas, in the world of great inflation, about 25% of my students always got A's. I've had a lot of really smart students, but never had another one like her. I love students like that. I teach an honors class, and the kids are so set on following a rubric to the letter that I love to set them up with an intentionally vague assignment in order to spur creativity. For example, to demonstrate that they understand the thematic elements of the literary movement for transcendentalism, I gave them the assignment, represent transcendentalism in another medium. So I actually got projects like a stop-motion video, a fake Tumblr, a children's book, a memory box, paintings, photography, etc. Honors kids tend to get the concepts quicker, but show reluctance if not given explicit instructions. I force them to be more interpretive. I had a student last fall in an Introduction to American Politics course, who was a computer science major taking the course as an elective. This kid absorbed information like a sponge and performed better on exams and essays than any of the political science majors. He would often drop by my office just to chat about politics and statistical programming. He eventually stopped coming to classes many days because I had to dumb down all the material so much for the other students. He still passed with flying colors and had a higher average than anyone else in the class, and eventually started a double major in political science and computer science. Students like that make the job worth the effort. My point here was that not only one single student makes the job worth the while, actually teaching is only 1/3 of my job, in addition to helping advise students and conducting my own research. I devote my position as a professor to all of my students individually, if they're willing to accept that attention. Many students refuse to come to class, complete assignments, study for exams, or show up at all during office hours. This is unfortunate for those students, and if I just described you, then you need to get off Reddit and read a fricking book. The truth is, I love my job very much. If I didn't, I would quit. Simple as that. I came for the story of a genius. I stayed for the repressed, salty rant of a college professor. Fun to get insight into the mind of one of our higher education authority figures. I did, however, it's a bit of a sad story. I worked at a special school for you people labeled as emotionally disturbed. One of my students would finish assignments in under 10 minutes. I would try to differentiate for him, but I'll be honest that I was a new teacher and not very good at it, combined with the fact that I was teaching 5 subjects and dealing with a variety of classroom challenges. Logically, his response was, "Why do I have to do more work just because I'm smart?" He had a fair point, and I couldn't see me forcing him to complete work that probably didn't challenge him anyway. So I let him play RuneScape. Now before you get pitchforks out, let me explain my logic. I, a bit of a nerd myself, understood the mental exercise of contemplating the most efficient or effective means of doing something in a video game, and although I never played RuneScape, figured it offered him an outlet to do something similar. Unfortunately, being a genius isn't all fun and games. Intellectual theorists say the further your IQ is from the norm of 100, the harder time you have relating to the masses. As I mentioned before, I was at a special school. This young man struggled with peer relations and had a crippling anxiety that often manifested in self-harm. He would beat his head on his desk, punch himself, slam his face into the corner of metal filing cabinets, etc. If we were lucky, he would just crawl under a desk and cry and cry. My heart went out to him, as I know sometimes thinking of my future and the world around me can turn into a grim task. I can only imagine how it looked to a young boy placed in a special ed setting when his mind was left to wander. I know my colleagues may disagree, but I still feel RuneScape was therapy. I've had some smart kids, so smart that others think they're a genius, but for me, they're just really clever. That being said, there was this one kid. Not that bright, but he did this one thing that had genius written all over it. I sat there talking him through some trig. Got to the point where it was something like tan 65 and I thought, damn, I forgot to grab a calculator. What did he do? He told me it to the nearest whole number. I was shocked and thought it was a fluke. I gave him another and guess what? He got that right too. He wasn't the brightest kid, but he knew his trig ratios. A kid in Standard Algebra 2 who never did a lick of homework but made hundreds on every test. I talked to him and he said he didn't see the point in wasting his time in homework when he already knew how to do the problems. A month or two into the year, I told him I'd just make his test average his grade. I also had a talk with him to say that sometimes in life you can cut to the chase when you know your stuff, but sometimes you still have to jump through hoops that seem stupid even when you don't see the point, and even when there might not be a point. To those saying that's a bad thing to say to an intelligent kid, try starting a business or patenting your game-changing invention without getting the proper government permits, etc. That even though I'm giving him a break, sometimes you have to do your homework, even when it seems unnecessary. As an aside, I later taught information technology, and I told the kids that if they earned their industry certification at the end of the year, A+ or Microsoft Technology Associate, depending on grade level, I'd change their grades so they got an A for the year, because earning the certification proves mastery of the concepts I was teaching. Had a 70 to 80% pass rate, and I really think this policy had something to do with that. It motivated the kids to work hard, and I almost never had to change a grade. Cops. Are there any crimes that you intentionally don't enforce? Just before Thanksgiving, my dad called me and informed me that I had failed to pay a parking ticket and that my license had been suspended. Concerned that I would get pulled over and ticketed, I decided to pay the ticket right there and then on my phone. Since I couldn't print the confirmation screen out, I just took a picture of the screen with my phone so I could prove that I had paid the ticket in the unlikely event that I got pulled over. Well, lo and behold, as I'm driving home for Thanksgiving the next day, I get pulled over by a state trooper. He immediately recognizes that my license was suspended and starts explaining that I was driving illegally and so on and so forth. Before he can lecture me too long, I whip out my phone, scroll to the picture of the ticket payment confirmation screen and hand him the phone. As soon as he grabbed the phone, he sort of furrowed his brow and in a completely teed-off tone he goes, "What the hell is this?" I'm about to calmly explain the situation to him when suddenly he tilts the screen towards me and I'm staring directly at a picture of my eggplant. My freaking heart stopped beating and I could feel all the blood in my body rushing to my face. I had accidentally flipped one picture too far to an eggplant pic I took for some ex-girlfriend when I was hammered, and I had then handed the phone to the cop. Time basically stopped as I was sure he was going to arrest me for some kind of harassment crime and put me on a watch list for life. Mortified, I shakily scrolled back to the payment confirmation pic and handed the phone back to him. He reluctantly looked at the screen, nodded, and then let out a little laugh. As he tossed my phone back to me, he said, "Have a nice Thanksgiving," and walked back to his car shaking his head. I drove home in complete silence and deleted any and all eggplant pics the moment I pulled into my parents' driveway. I am forever in that dude's debt for just laughing it off instead of throwing me in prison. In conclusion, I accidentally showed a picture of my member to a state trooper and he didn't smash my face in with a baton. I will try my best not to arrest a parent in front of a small child. With a misdemeanor, you have quite a bit of officer discretion, but I've gone so far as to wait for an hour or so until a family member can pick up the kid before I handcuff the parent. It just really bothers me. I want kids to trust police officers if they ever need help, not be afraid of them. That's a good level of compassion there. Have to arrest you, but wait until mum comes to fetch the kid so the kid doesn't have a scarring memory of daddy. Driving between St. Louis, Missouri and Dayton, Ohio, I got pulled over around midnight by a cop on the freeway. I was confused a bit since I hadn't been speeding, but my car had California plates, as that's the state where I lived at the time, and I thought, well, maybe I have a tail light out or something. First thing he says when he sees my license and registration, "California, huh? Got a lot of pot in the car?" Because I'm a moron and I was tired, my answer was, "Define a lot." He did not find it funny. Luckily, his partner did. The guy with my license and registration, a younger white guy, kept his stone-cold face and said, "Step out of the car, please," while the older black cop just tried to keep from laughing out loud. "Hands on the hood, feet apart," he says, and he starts to pat me down. "Mind if you tell me what you're looking for?" I ask. "Do you have anything in your pockets that'll harm me? Needles or something?" "I have a Swiss Army knife in my right pocket, but it's all closed up," I say. "How do I know that?" he asks accusingly. Again, I turn into Captain Moron. Because I wouldn't keep a naked 3-inch blade only a couple of inches from my member while driving across the country. This time the older cop does laugh out loud and the younger guy looks flustered. He tells me slowly to turn around with hands above my shoulders, then he backs up 4 steps and says to use my left hand to empty my pockets onto the hood of the car. The older cop just sighs and says, "Hold on a sec, don't move," and pulls the younger guy to the back of the cop car where they have a very private and brief conversation. The younger one gets into the car and gets on the radio, while the older one comes up to me and says, "Look, you know why we pulled you over? Because you were swerving in the lane a bit. Thought you might be drunk. How long have you been driving?" "About 5 hours. I left St. Louis around 7, hoping to make it to Dayton." "You been drinking?" "Diet Coke and Gatorade mostly. No alcohol or anything." "You need some sleep, son. Dayton's still about 45 minutes away. Think you can make it?" To be honest, I was kind of tired, but I think you guys just scared me awake. He smiles. "Alright, hang tight a sec," and walks back to the car. He comes back. "You have 2 bench warrants in California, and there's an APB out in the car as stolen after an armed robbery." "What?" I say. "That doesn't make any sense. I never did anything." I'm panicking now. I'm freaking out. In a second, my night just went from boring to awful. "Actually, just messing with you. You're free to go. Hopefully that adrenaline will keep you awake for an hour," he says. I laugh and say, "Jesus frickin' Christ, that is effed up, man." He just smiles and says, "Take care, stay on the road." I got to Dayton around 1 a.m. and couldn't fall asleep until 3. That dude knew his crap. Well, I'm not a cop, but this happened to me during my substance using days. This was years and years ago, and I'm proud to be clean now. I was driving to work when a cop recognized me and knew I was driving with a suspended license. He searched my car before he arrested me. As we were pulling up to the jail, he held up a bag of needles he found under my seat. He said, "If you promise to quit this, I'll throw these away before we pull into the station." My mom bailed me out a few hours later and took me straight to rehab. That cop was awesome. He saved me from being in big-time trouble, and likely saved my life by scaring me into rehab. You have no idea how often us cops try to do this. If we know someone is a frequent flyer, and we recognize what the underlying problem is, we will go out of our way to solve that problem rather than just making the arrest. Because I know if I can solve this person's addiction, illness, or apathy, then I won't have to continue to take dispatched runs there. I've got junkies and drunks into rehab. I've paid for a young working girl's bus ticket home to Chicago so she could be with her family and her support system. She was in a city all by herself, and her pimp had her so strung out she couldn't tell you what day of the week it was. If I know someone is religious, or their family is religious, I'll use that as leverage to try and get people into rehab. Arresting someone, as said before, is just a tool used to temporarily solve the problem. It's a band-aid, not a cure. By the way, by my estimates, I'd say that 70 to 75% of all domestic-related run-ins have an addiction element in them, substances or booze. 95% of homeless that I've dealt with are addicts themselves, and I'd say 65% have mental health issues. My first run-in with the law at 17. I was driving on a 3-lane highway at rush hour going 85 in the far left lane while tailgating a big SUV. A van parked in the left shoulder suddenly came into view. I had drifted slightly into the shoulder and swerved to avoid sideswiping the van. Being a young, inexperienced driver, I overcorrected. Full panic set in as my Honda Civic slid into the left guardrail, sailed across all 3 lanes of traffic, flipped around, facing the wrong direction, and finally skidded to a halt. It shook me up good, but I didn't hit a single soul. Cop: "How fast were you going?" Me: "About 70 to 75? "The speed limit here is 55. Are you sure you were going that fast?" "Maybe I was going faster. It could have been 80 or 85. Him, face-palming: "The speed limit here is 55. If you are going faster, I have to ticket you for reckless driving. I don't want to ticket you. Tell me, what's the speed limit here?" 55? "How fast were you going?" 55? "That's right. You were going 55. Then to the next question. "I didn't see any damage to the guardrail that you hit. Did you?" "I don't know. There could be some damage. I didn't see it." "If there's damage to the guardrail, you'll have to pay a few $1,000s to fix it. Now, did you see any damage to the guardrail?" "I didn't." "No, I didn't see any damage either." "Good." In conclusion, cop had me change my story so as not to incriminate myself. This sounds like something I can relate to, too stupid to accept the obvious easy out I was being offered. Here's a follow-up comment below. Reminds me, in college I lived on the second floor of a small apartment complex. Everyone in the buildings was students, and 90% of the buildings in the area housed students. The people downstairs were having a decent-sized party that had spilled outside onto the deck and front yard, which isn't really a big deal as it was a weekend night with nothing but students around. A high school student who was at the party had wandered off about a block away and was peeing on a fence. A cop was driving by and turned his lights on. Kid, of course, runs right back to the party, which causes the cops to come and break it up. As the cops arrive, I head back upstairs and watch everything unfold from my balcony. The cops are talking to the guys who live below. Cop: "This kid we saw down the street says you're responsible for him. If you are, we have to arrest, ticket, whatever the punishment you, for providing alcohol to a minor. Are you responsible for him?" Neighbor: "Yes, he's my friend." "Are you sure you're responsible?" "Yes." "Are you really sure?" "Yes." "If you don't know him, we will just call his parents to pick him up. So are you responsible for him?" "Oh, wait, no, I've never seen him before." Police officer here. There are plenty I don't enforce, but as stated above, I have enforcement discretion in 99% of situations. My hands are rarely forced to pursue charges where the victim is the state or city. Traffic violations, substance charges, etc. I personally try not to enforce anything that I'd do. I speed sometimes I'll roll a stop sign, and other minor things. I hate working traffic and generally stay too busy bouncing from call to call to actually do it, so that also has a bearing on what I enforce. Now that being said, I will hammer you if you're causing direct danger to another person. If you're excessively speeding during rush hour, through a school zone, or with kids in your car, then I will issue paperwork all day. But it generally has to be a situation that causes immediate danger to someone other than yourself. If it's 3 a.m. and you're doing 70 in a 50 on a back road, chances are I'm just going to let you be. Also, petty stuff. There's a lot of technicalities written in laws. Sometimes slight variations make something legal become illegal. I try to avoid crap like that. I try to keep a good repertoire with the people in the areas I work in. So taking enforcement action on some bullcrap law is a quick way to make enemies. I've learned over the years that the people I'm nice to today may be the ones who come to my rescue tomorrow. It's happened before. Warnings are my best friend. People appreciate warnings. Usually, "Hey man, you know your headlight's out? Try to get it fixed, okay?" is enough so that next time you see them, it'll be working. And finally, Reddit's favorite subject, green herb. I work with a lot of younger guys. We're all pretty progressive and understand that Mary J. prohibition is a joke. Most of us try our best not to take action on a personal use unless we absolutely have to. Sadly, the older guys around here don't share our views on the subject, and what's even worse is that they are our sergeants, lieutenants, and captains. Sometimes our hands are forced, but I work with a very good department that does allow us tons of enforcement discretion. Not a cop, but my dad is. This isn't exactly a refusal to enforce a particular law, but he works in an area of higher crime rates and he's always trying to instill a sense of trust in the youth. One day, he was walking back to his patrol car after a call and he saw some younger guys playing basketball. He walks over to them and sternly asks for the ball. They ask him why, but with no explanation, he again tells them to hand the ball over. They disappointedly toss the ball over, thinking it's just another butthole cop trying to ruin their day. Instead, my dad drains a 3 and just walks away. He believes that interactions like this with cops will give the youth a better sense of trust in law enforcement systems. Just thought I'd share. He would have looked like such a tool if he missed. Cop here. I generally don't arrest for small amounts of Mary J. A, I don't think that green herb is bad, and B, it's nearly legalized medicine at this point anyway. I'm not big on ticket writing. Tickets are expensive and almost everyone is broke right now. I find that usually a 2-minute conversation with an officer makes people change their driving habits anyway. Plus they feel super lucky for having caught a break. You need to remember that officers have a lot of discretion. However, if there's a victim and probable cause, that discretion can go away. For instance, shoplifting a $2 item. If the store caught you and insists on prosecution, there's not much that I can do. The thing is, I still have discretion over what to do with a person, i.e. release them from the scene with a ticket, bring them to the station to fingerprint or photograph or issue a ticket and release, or book them into jail overnight. Any contacts can turn into a dangerous situation. Go to odmp.org and look at the line of duty deaths just for 2012. 2 of them occurred during regular prisoner transports. Generally, the more dangerous the call seems, the more amped up, aware, and prepared you are. I'm more worried about getting shot as I open the bathroom door after taking a leak at a gas station. I've never thought about the downtime of a police's life being so dangerous, and the fact that a lot of fatalities can occur at the least expected time in it. It does make sense, I suppose. I do not enforce Mary J so long as 1. It's a misdemeanor account, 2. You're not selling, 3. You're not a prick. That being said, I will make you dispose of it. I'm allergic to it or something. Within seconds of coming close to it, I will get a migraine. Homosexual behavior is still on the books in Texas under deviant behavior. I don't enforce this. The selling of armadillos is against the law in Texas as well. I won't arrest you, but I'm documenting it. It's like a bucket list of offenses I want to come across as a cop. I am not likely to write any traffic citation so long as it's not a hazardous violation and so long as you agree to fix the issue. I usually try and find all drunks an alternative to jail unless they're driving or fighting. I never let something slide because it might be dangerous. I signed up knowing full well I can die doing this job, and have used myself as a shield to protect people on more than one occasion. I hope this helps. Back when I was a cop, 12 years ago, I never arrested anyone for possession of Mary J. It was pointless, and there are already too many people in jail for what I deem minor possession charges. I remember I stopped a guy. Well, I didn't stop him, he was stopped at a stop sign for 13 minutes before I pulled up behind him. I questioned him, realized that he was baked out of his mind because he told me he was waiting for the stop sign to turn green. Pulled him out of the car, got permission to search, found a bag with about a half an ounce in it, and I went over to him and asked if he had someone who could come and get him. He called his girlfriend, and as we waited, I threw his bag in the ditch. When his girlfriend got there, I said this to him: I'm gonna sit right over here in that parking lot and do my reports. If I see you back here before I leave, I'll arrest you. I don't care if you come back and get the stuff from the ditch, but it better be after I leave. He didn't come back, but the bag was gone by the time my shift ended. I've always been a proponent of legalizing Mary J. Why? Because if we're at a bar and I'm drunk and I bump into another drunk guy, chances are we're going to fight. If I'm high and I bump into another high guy, chances are we laugh. It can't be legalized for a myriad of reasons that I won't get into here. The premise of the question is inherently flawed because of a common misconception about how policing works. The law is less a set of rules cops have to enforce and more a tool cops have for handling situations. It's pretty rare that cops have to enforce the law. Felonies and certain domestic or abuse crimes are the only ones that have to be charged, and even there, it's not hard to find wiggle room on how you define the crime. For example, public drunkenness is a crime. Do I stand in front of bars and make everyone do sobriety tests? No. Now, if you're yelling and screaming like a jackass and making a scene, I'll come up and tell you it's time to get gone. If that doesn't work, I'll arrest you for public drunkenness and make you bookings problem. So do I choose not to enforce particular laws? Yeah, all the time. It's basically my entire job. And this trickles down into your other questions. Enforcing the law is always weighed against what risks are associated with the arrest, how likely the victims are to testify, and a dozen other factors. Law enforcement is more art than science. Bonus secret, most cops, particularly in cities, don't want to arrest people for the day-to-day silliness. It's a lot of paperwork, you're now responsible for the person while you get them cited or booked, and then you have to go to court on your days off. It's really just a huge pain in the butt. The trick to slipping out of most arrests is about making letting you go less of a hassle than arresting you. Question: when you say making letting you go less of a hassle than arresting you, can you elaborate a little? Less hassle is as follows. Number 1. Get gone. If a cop says move along, your best bet is to be somewhere else. 98% of the time, this is all the bar owners or neighbors want. The last guy standing there arguing about how the Constitution gives him the right to sing Free Bird at 3 a.m. on a public street corner usually loses that argument and a chunk of his next paycheck. Number 2. Be a good sobriety wingman. When I'm dealing with the numerous situations that come from drunk people, I usually look for their sober friend because he's the best bet to defuse the situation. Don't be afraid to step in for your friend and say something like, "Officer, I know he's gotten out of hand, my car is over here, let me take him home, and he won't be any more trouble." Rare is the cop who will pass up an opportunity to make a drunk person someone else's problem. 3. Fight it out in the morning. There's this kind of bizarre belief that cops are going to be your referee for bar fights, domestics, and all kinds of assorted nonsense. We're never going to figure out who was right. We've only been called because the fighting or screaming. If it's a bar thing, just let it go and move on. If it's a domestic, don't try and convince the cop you were right. Convince the cop you're reasonable enough to not fight anymore. Offer to take a walk or stay with a friend. Come back to argue in the morning when you've got a cooler head. In conclusion, cops are there to de-escalate the situation or lock people up. If you're willing to be the one to de-escalate, you're more likely to avoid being locked up. There we go. We not only have a list of crimes that cops are likely to let people walk for, we also have suggestions of ways to increase your likelihood of that outcome. I policed a small town for a decade and have been at a city station for longer. Generally, if I come across a situation where I could use my discretion, I would. For example, I would usually convey a drunk home rather than have them sober up in the cells. For recidivist offenders where a brush with the law was not sufficient, or where a person's behavior warranted more direct action, I would enforce the law to the letter. I'm all about giving people a chance, but only up to a point, even if I don't agree with the penalty that might be enacted at court, or if I don't agree with the law itself. I have never not arrested just because of a dangerous situation. I couldn't live with myself if a failure to act on my part led to a bad day for a member of the public. That, and I don't want to leave a job undone, just so some of my workmates have to come in later to do it. Hopefully that answers your question. I remember during high school prom, 9 to 10 years ago, I had my parents' car. It was a pretty fast car at that time, a 300 horsepower V8. I was driving like a complete idiot, going over double the speed limit. A cop sees me and follows me just as I pull into my friend's driveway. I walk over to him knowing that I've messed up big time. He was pretty intimidating and borderline yelling at me. He eventually let me off, saying he didn't want to ruin my prom night. I was basically yes sirring the entire time while crapping my pants. Wherever this cop is, I have never been pulled over for speeding since. You did a damn good job, and I now race my current car in a controlled track environment. I still love to drive fast, but it never happens on public roads. Arbitrary laws stopping drinking are counterproductive. Sensible drinking should be something that you're brought into. In continental Europe, it's perfectly normal to drink a small amount of wine with a meal. You just mix in water to lower the alcohol content, and drinking sensibly becomes the norm. When you make drinking illegal, all that happens is people start drinking with no prior experience and end up drinking to excess, which in turn promotes violence and makes many areas dangerous at night. I would make a distinction between laws that I chose not to enforce and crimes. I never wrote a speeding ticket for less than 15 over, unless there's an extenuating circumstance, school zone, extremely careless, butthole, etc. I also never got really excited about small amounts of Mary J, a violation as opposed to a crime in the state I worked in. Criminal offenses are a little different. I can't recall ever not enforcing a solid criminal offense, unless it was something small. Criminal trespass where it was easier to just run the person off, or if the person was rolling on someone else, or the victim wasn't interested in prosecution. That doesn't mean I wouldn't write a citation to appear and forward the case to the DA on a weak case or for other circumstances. Also, I once arrested a county commissioner's son for DUI and had a former friend arrested for it as well. I do not believe in breaks for nepotism. There are some circumstances that I'm aware of that police openly ignore some criminal activity because enforcement becomes impossible. Enforcing Mary J laws at Grateful Dead concerts would be pointless.
What happened to you when you were young that you didn't understand until years later, potentially not safe for work? I was in LA at the age of 10 and ended up with sunburn as I am English and not used to the heat. My dad took me to the restroom where we shared a stall, and he helped me take my t-shirt off so that he could reapply after sun. This was pretty painful. I was screaming inside a locked stall, saying that it hurt, so was surprised when a burly guy forced open the door, looking quite annoyed at my dad, who explained correctly what was happening. I grimaced through the pain and agreed as best as possible. Only years later that I realized that burly guy was a top bloke, and that the pain he was trying to save me from wasn't that kind of chafing. TLDR, a nice, bear-like man made sure I wasn't being inappropriately touched by my own father. I found a butt inside my dad's closet when I was 6. A butt. Looking back on it now, it was probably an adult toy, just something he made to look like a woman's butt. Either way, I pulled it out of his closet and was sitting next to it on the couch when he got home from work. I was a lonely kid. Edit, I'm a girl. When me and my sister were around the ages of 8 and 6, we gave our mom a necklace for her birthday. She was about 36 years old at that time. It was a blue/green twinkling necklace, and we thought it was perfect for mom because she loves glitter and jewelry. She wore it at every occasion she had guests for dinner and similar. We were very proud of our gift because she liked it so much that she wore it all the time. Years later, I realized that it was an ugly piece of crap. Really, no sane human would wear this dog collar in disguise. I cringed at the thought of actually having given it to mom. Then it clicked. She wore it for us, so that we don't feel guilty of giving crappy things to her while making a fool out of herself in front of everybody else. I love you, Mom. When I was about 14, a guy who I went to school with had leukemia. He disappeared from school for a while he had chemo, and then came back when he recovered a little. We weren't particularly close. In fact, there'd been a little bit of animosity between us, for no particular reason, just petty kid stuff. But last day of term, as I was walking towards the school gate, he caught up with me and walked with me. He told me he was sorry there'd been tension between us and that he liked me and hoped we could be friends. He died during the summer break, and I realized sometime later that maybe he had known he wasn't going to make it, and that he was trying to make his peace with the world before he went. When I was a little kid, we had a kid in our class named George who was mentally disabled. We had special needs kids in our school, and we wouldn't have them in the same class, but they would share recess with the rest of us. George dressed funny, he couldn't speak very well, and he had a hard time understanding what we were telling him. As you might imagine, this led to a lot of the kids excluding him or making fun of him. My friends and I decided to be his friend. He was a nice kid, didn't mean any harm. He was just a bit slow. Years later, in telling the story to someone else, I remember my teacher explaining that he was quote-unquote Greek, which I didn't understand at the time. Thinking about it, I remember that just like the special needs kids, the ESL kids shared recess with us. George wasn't disabled. He was just a recent immigrant from Greece who didn't speak English very well. Visiting my aunt and her cool roommate Susan when I was a child. Didn't realize until my cousin said something when I was in high school. You mean her roommate? Oh, holy crap. My mom told me that my goldfish ran away. You are now imagining a fish with legs. You're welcome. We had a science fair in 6th grade, and I was doing some sleep experiment or something. Being the know-it-all I was, I referred to my subjects as testes, like trainees, I thought. My teacher politely suggested calling them test takers instead. Years later, it dawned upon me, and I have mad respect for him not laughing in my face. I would have. When I was 12, my divorced mother and I lived in a nice duplex in my hometown. She would go to the city after I fell asleep and party downtown with my aunt almost every night. I didn't know this until I was older. One night in particular, I fell asleep on the couch and halfway woke up to the sound of the front door opening and closing. I saw my mom walk in with a creepy, hooded, shadowy figure close behind her. I fell back asleep. The next morning, I asked my mom who was with her when she came home last night. She looked terribly confused. I told her about the figure behind her, and the color drained out of her face, and she shook her head and told me to stop playing games. That if I kept telling ghost stories, I would invite malevolent spirits into the house. Found out like a year ago that she brought a guy home and made me believe it was a ghost so I wouldn't tell my grandparents. Crafty woman. TLDR, my mother brought a guy home one night and let me believe for over 10 years that I had seen a ghost. Sometimes we would stop at my aunt's work so that my dad could go in and talk to her. I wasn't allowed in because I was a kid and it was an adult place. The only other things that ever got the descriptor adult were adult films, which were not for kids because of all the screwing. So I happily assumed that my aunt worked someplace where all sorts of screwing was happening. Years later, I was driving by and noticed that it was a retirement home. When I was about 4 or 5, we got 2 very important life-changing bits of medical news. The first was that my baby brother was on the way. The second was that my father was diagnosed with acute lymphoma and had about 2 weeks to live. When I was little, I had no grasp of how serious cancer was. My mom told me my dad was sick, but that was it. I remember my mom kept insisting that I spent time with him, but I would always get angry when he got too tired to play or kick me out so he could vomit from the chemo. I remember one night in particular where my school had my first back-to-school night/carnival. They had all sorts of rides and stuff. My dad had just had extensive surgery and had staples across his entire neck. I used to joke that he was like Frankenstein. My dad managed to make it through the big presentation the teacher made to the whole class and their parents, but barely. I thought this was boring, but would be worth sitting through because I would get to go on carnival rides afterwards. But my dad had to leave. He couldn't even stand up. I could not understand how my strong 6'4" father could be so selfish. If he could sit through the boring part, why not the good part? I, to this day, feel tremendously guilty over how I treated him and the tantrum I threw when my mom was struggling to hold my dad up and my dad was struggling just to stay conscious. Fortunately, the doctors were wrong. He made it well past the 2 weeks and eventually beat cancer 5 years later. It took years before I understood how seriously sick he really was. He had gotten down to 90 pounds, but to me, he was still a Superman. We had this gym teacher in elementary school that would bring a bag of apples to class and give the girls one if they'd give him a massage. I was mad because I absolutely loved apples, still do. I thought it was unfair that only the girls got apples, so I told my teacher how Mr. So-and-so would only let the girls massage him for apples, and we had to do sports. I was not an athletic child, so the idea of eating apples versus gym activities greatly appealed to me. I had to go to the principal's office to tell them my story, which was basically, this is bullcrap. Everyone should be getting apples, or no one should be getting apples. Other students corroborated my story, and soon enough, so-and-so was gone. TLDR, escaped, prevented, and ended potential inappropriate abuse from a teacher because I love apples. My dad was a fairly strict guy. Military background, very type A, etc. I was a very outdoorsy tomboy of a girl. As a kid, I loved to find caterpillars and build them little homes and find the best flowers for them to eat, and my dad loved this hobby of mine. So much so, he would encourage my caterpillar hunting, which I always thought seemed a little weird, but I didn't question it. There were a few plants out by our barbecue in the back that he specifically asked me to keep an eye on, because, as he told it to me, this was the best place to find them. My kid brain just thought my dad and I had found a common ground and that he wanted to help. About 5 years later, as my naivete started to wear off, I realized my dad was a total pothead. My brother, who is 10 years older than me, was chatting with me about my new realization one day, and that's when it was finally spelled out for me. Those plants that, according to my pops, were the best place to find my footed worm friends were actually just my dad's pot plants, and he enlisted my help to keep them bug-free. TLDR, my dad encouraged me to hunt caterpillars off his pot plants. I just thought he was trying to help me find the coolest bugs to play with. I'm a redhead, but neither of my parents or my brother is a redhead. So when we were out in public when I was young, a lot of people would ask where my red hair came from. One day, when I was probably 6 or so, my parents told me to start answering the question with, "From the mailman," which I did constantly because people always seemed to react to it. It wasn't until I got to high school that it clicked that the mailman in this scenario had not delivered my red hair in an envelope, but that it had come from a much different package. When I was about 8, I was using my parents' bathroom and picked up a hand towel by the sink and a plastic member fell out. I already knew what a member was since my siblings and I had watched the hilarious Where Did I Come From sexual education video narrated by Howie Mandel. I thought this plastic member was hilarious, and when my little sister was taking a shower, I poked it in through the shower curtain and would poke her with it. She thought it was pretty funny too. Our mom was horrified to find us playing with it, and when we asked what it was for, she said it was for medical purposes and studying. We were never able to find it again. It wasn't until a few years ago when my sister and I were reminiscing about stupid things we did as children that I remembered this incident and told her, "Oh my god, we played with mom's adult toy." TLDR, found my mom's adult toy and joked around with it. Sister and I didn't realize until about 15 years later what it was. When I was 6, we used to play a lot with Pokemon cards at school. One recess, I left my deck inside the classroom. When I came back, my Charizard was missing from it. 3 days later, a friend from class came to me and told me he found my Charizard outside in a bush. Took me 10 years to realize he stole it from me and then got cold feet and gave it back. When I was 7 and my brother was 4, a man came up to the backyard where we were playing and asked if he wanted to see the puppy in his van. My brother said yes and he started to follow him. I grabbed my brother's arm and screamed very dramatically, "No!" until my parents came out. The man waved at my parents and then drove away. I felt a little embarrassed for, quote, overreacting by screaming no like that. Looking back, there is no way he wasn't a creeper. I asked my mom just now if she remembered that, and why she didn't report him to the police to let them know there was a potential kidnapper in the neighborhood. She said, because he didn't actually do anything. When I was younger, my house was messy, and my mom only ever cleaned on special occasions, and that was only certain rooms people were allowed in. I always thought this was completely normal. We had wine boxes holding up our couch and shoved right up our chimney, which was covered by a fire screen. Our kitchen smelled of mold and rotting food, the benches and floors were covered in the source of the smell and other unidentifiable objects. My clothes used to sit in a washing basket so long after they were washed that they would start to grow fuzz. There was one room beside mine which was so overpacked with rubbish and toys that I could barely crack the door open. It was just filthy overall. No one ever saw this though, and if they did, I can only imagine that my mom would have lost custody of me immediately, and I think she knew that. I lived like that until I was 12, and I didn't really understand what was happening until recently when watching an episode of Hoarders. It's kinda messed me up. I can't sleep unless my house is spotless, and I constantly have panic attacks if I forget to clean something before leaving the house. In kindergarten, I had a best friend named Daniel, and we played with toy dinosaurs and traded them all the time. January comes around, and I invite him to my birthday party I was having at my house. He never showed up that day, and my mom told me that day he wasn't going to be able to make it, as well as he wouldn't be able to come to school again. Little kid me was like, okay, I'll see him later. He died in a car crash on the way to my birthday party. Edit, thank you for your support and kind words. To the people saying this didn't happen or other rude things, this did happen, and I feel sad every single birthday I have. To the people asking did I get his gift, I did not. But I still have the last glow-in-the-dark Triceratops that he gave me. Really, how heartless do you have to be to just assume a story somebody wrote on the internet is made up, especially when it's about something as emotional as this? Like, I get it, you could easily lie about something for clout or internet points, but come on man, you can't just assume something like that. I hope I'm not late to the party. When I was about 6 or 7, I was looking for bugs in my backyard when I came across a super rare and cool praying mantis. Naturally, I scooped it up and put it in my bug container. Later on, I was looking for more bugs when I found yet another praying mantis. Lucky day. I was super excited and put it in the container with the other praying mantis. Both of them stood in there dead still and just kind of bobbed around like praying mantises do. I came back a few years later and was appalled by what I found. The bigger mantis standing there as still as ever right on top of a praying mantis head and legs. I was super spooked. Was that mantis a killer? Did the smaller mantis fall apart or explode? What happened? It really weirded me out for a while. I'd say about 10 or so years later, I found out that the female mantis eats the male after screwing. I still don't know if I'm an accomplice to a murderer or a world-class wingman. In my adolescence, telemarketers frequently called our house. My parents instructed my sister and myself to respond to questions like, is your mom or dad home? With, she or he's in the shower. Well, one summer day, when I was 6, we got a telemarketer call. After I explained I was only a child and could subsequently not conduct business for the household, he asked, is your mom home? I said, no, she's in the shower. What about your dad? He's in there too. It was not until years later that I realized his sudden embarrassed laughing was caused by me accidentally making this guy think my parents were getting it on in the shower while their poor innocent son was home. I lost one of my teeth when I was 7 years old, so I was excited to get money and stuff from the tooth fairy. I put the tooth under the pillow and I was ready to get my prize for losing a tooth. The next morning, I woke up and the tooth was gone, but no present. I went and told my dad about how I just got scanned from the tooth fairy and he was like, oh, the tooth fairy had to run fast, so she gave me the money to give to you. He then pulls out his wallet and gives me the $2 that the tooth fairy gave him. I was so happy, but still wondered why the tooth fairy was in such a rush. My mom was really intent on having my younger brother believe in things like Santa and the tooth fairy for as long as possible. Once she forgot to replace his tooth with money. I asked her about it, and in her infinite wisdom, she had me, I got home before everyone else, make a letter from the tooth fairy to explain why I was late. I said that 2 kids had gotten into a fight and knocked every single one of their teeth out, so she ran out of quarters and had to run home to get more. I was quite proud of the story, and he bought it. But he started having doubts, so he left a note with one of his teeth asking for proof that the tooth fairy was real. My mom wrote him a letter back and taped a small lock of black hair to it. All of my family has blonde hair except for my dad, but he keeps his very short. He bought it hook, line, and sinker, and didn't find out the tooth fairy wasn't real until well after he lost all of his teeth. Had that note on his wall for years. Turns out the hair was from the single black spot on my grandma's dog that was living with us at the time. Pure genius. When I was 6 and my brother was 4, we used to walk to our cousin's house, which was 2 houses down. One evening, we asked our mother if we could go over and she said yes and lets us walk over by ourselves. While we're walking, this car drives up to us and asks if we knew where the nearest McDonald's was and if we'd like to come with him. I told him we weren't allowed to eat McDonald's without our mother's permission and turned to get her to ask if we were allowed. She was already running outside to get us when the car sped off. I was around 15 when I was reminiscing with my family and she brought it up. Creepy realization. When I would stay at my grandmother's house, I had a bunch of VHS tapes about dinosaurs and stuff that I wanted to watch. Sometimes I get to watch them, but only if my grandpa was home. Mima always said, "You'll have to wait until Peepaw gets back. I can't work that VCR." She also had all her soaps recorded on tape, and many times I saw her record them without my grandpa being home. She feigned incompetence so that she didn't have to watch my dinosaur movies, and I never realized it until I was an adult. It is the wise woman who plays the fool. Mima, you sly fox. I never understood that not everyone had people drop bags of groceries on their steps, while the people just rang the bell and drove away. Dawned on me as an adult that we were poor. Then, I looked back at the old pics and noticed all the signs. Tiny Christmas tree in the background, disappointed faces on Christmas pics, no vacation pictures. Dang it, I'm gonna try to avoid having my kids live that way. The other part of that is I didn't realize how stressed my mom always was until I got older and realized not everyone's parents freaked out weekly and slammed doors and peeled off in their car, leaving their kids alone and scared. I specifically remember one incident where my mom, brother, and I went to the grocery store, and while we were all walking to the car, my mom dropped a gallon of milk and it exploded all over the ground. My mom started crying, and my brother said, "Don't cry over spilled milk, Mom," kind of chuckling. I didn't understand at all. Now, looking back, it hurts me to think how hard my mom was trying to keep everything together. She passed away at age 51 when I was 18. She had a rough adulthood. I live my life now hoping to become what she wanted me to be. She made tons of mistakes, but she was there for me on her own, and she tried so hard. All you teens, take notice of how your parents act when they think you're not looking. You might be surprised to find that they are very stressed and working super hard to make you happy, oftentimes with only frustration to show for it. I was cleaning chickens with my grandparents when I was a kid, probably about 10 years old. I was pulling out the insides, and I found what I thought were 2 eggs that were growing inside the chicken. I got all excited and showed my grandma and told my mom about it when she picked me up. I noticed that they both had smirks that seemed odd when I told them about it. Years later, I thought back about that time and realized that it was a rooster, and those were his nuts. Sounds like somebody found out why roosters go cock-a-doodle-doo. I'm sorry. Okay, this one's a wild ride, so stick around. Carjacked with my cousin. I was 12, she was 16. Gun pointed at my head and everything. At the court hearing, they were caught, my lawyer person lady asked if I was aware that the 4 men who carjacked my cousin and I had intention to kidnap us, as the police found duct tape and rope in their getaway car and they fessed up to it. That was a heavy bomb dropped on me while I was testifying against them, but I never really understood how lucky I was until I was older. Since everyone asked why they changed their minds, I've heard that the leader of the group decided against it because we reminded him of his kid sisters. Since it was technically my uncle's car and happened in my uncle's driveway, they were the ones responsible for pressing charges against the men, who were pulled over for speeding down the freeway just as 2 detectives arrived to ask us questions. The car was totaled.
What's the worst thing your parents have found on your phone or computer? Just so our listeners are aware, you're going to be getting more of an ASMR effect as I speak quieter and closer to the microphone. I've been a little bit sick and I want to avoid tearing my throat. I spent about 5 days in a mental institution about 15 months ago. I gave my mum the passcode to my phone for whatever reason, to either Snapchat people or read my text that I'd received, or something small, in and out like that. Like, she had to click one thing, tell me what it said, respond, and close it. I was 16, by the way. Anyway, when I got home, she told me she found pictures of a negative pregnancy test on my phone from a month or so earlier, and she took me to a doctor. Turns out I had scar tissue in my uterus from a miscarriage 6-ish months earlier. Scared the crap out of me. Very grateful that she did it because the tissue could have inhibited me from having children in the future if it had gotten necrotic or something. I lived with my aunt briefly when I was about 12 years old. One night my uncle hooked me up with a bunch of video games and installed them on my computer. My brother said he saw my uncle find my adult flick stash on my computer, but I assumed he was messing with me. Well, next morning, apparently, my very uptight aunt barged into my room while I was on the computer and told me, "There are some things on your computer you need to delete." I immediately realized my brother was telling the truth, so under my aunt's burning gaze, I went to the adult flick folder to delete it. Only I have so much adrenaline going through me that instead of just deleting the folder itself, I decide to click it open. So now there's a bunch of extra large thumbnails showing on my monitor of hardcore adult flicks, while my aunt is standing right behind me. This gives me another shot of adrenaline and my 12-year-old head is swimming. I try to select all of the files, but my hands are so damn wigged out now that instead of being able to select all the thumbnails to delete them, I keep just double-clicking on an image of a girl getting railed by some gorilla of a man. This happens around 3 more times as I'm physically unable to make my hand work the mouse properly, and all I can think about is my aunt thinking, why in the world does this kid keep clicking on this crap? Eventually, I finally delete everything. Writing this has made me realize that I need to ask my uncle why he decided to be a rat next time I see him. When I was 11, they found out I search, "Does white snow affect cows?" Well, does it? If I recall correctly, most mammals are affected by white snow. With a body weight like that, it's going to be expensive. I don't see what the problem is personally. I Google that kind of thing all the time out of morbid curiosity. Before I had my own computer, I'd use my dad's desktop to browse the internet, listen to music, etc. I would message a friend of mine on Facebook quite a bit. We'd talk about a lot of stuff, but of course, mainly girls from school. Dad saw a few messages that were extremely explicit about a few girls from class, about wanting to be smothered by their various bodily parts and crap stuff like that. One of the most embarrassing moments of my life. Extremely passionate diary entries about Daniel Radcliffe from the Philosopher's Stone era. I was around 11, and the diary entries were in epistolary format. Cringe. Back in 1999 or so, my mum was embarrassed that I had a song called Horny Horns on the computer when we had to get it fixed. I told her it barely had any lyrics and it wasn't naughty at all, but she was worried the computer guy would think it was. When we got the computer back, the guy said I had some interesting taste in music in there, late 90s techno, and she said, "See? The only reason he listened to it is because it had horny in the name." I'm so embarrassed. I can imagine this guy with his pants down, lube, and tissues at the ready, only to click on it and it plays 90s techno. On the other hand, it does take real dedication to your craft to be able to pleasure yourself to a MIDI file. Mum saw my history of adult fun time scenes in TV shows and unspeakable act scenes. It was in 4th grade. I was curious and absolutely mortified. Yeah, I found that stuff when I was 9. Thought it was way too adult for me. So I searched prawn for kids and kid prawn. My parents are probably on some kind of list. This is somehow messed up and wholesome at the same time. Ah yes, the curious kid searches. My son did this as well when he was about that age, except it was a little more gay. He didn't understand what that word meant, so he naturally went to YouTube to see what he could find. So he's seen some stuff at a young age. I accidentally sent my mum a fanfiction about SpongeBob getting the unspeakable act committed against him by a gang. When I was younger, my mum found a lesbian adult flicks on my computer. I blamed it on my grandma. I guess this isn't bad, but it did change my life. My sister went on a shared laptop and I had stupidly left open my internet browser which had pro-anorexia websites and blogs still open. I was 14 or 15. She told my mum, who thought it was a cry for attention, but it really wasn't. I was furious that they'd found this and was promptly sent into a network of doctors for my eating disorder. Kinda pre-rehab for those who aren't physically needing hospitalization but mentally are messed up. It was a rough 4 years, but who knows where I'd be if I hadn't gotten the help I needed back then. I'm doing much better now. ED conquered. Nothing, 'cause I'm the best at hiding stuffs. Hid my brother 7 years ago, and no one has found him yet. My mum found a Tumblr post when I was 18 where I'd said, "Wow, today I got 4 piercings and did it in the butt for the first time. #eventful. Like others have said, my browser history. However, my mother printed them out, like Excel format, 4 or 5 pages long like some sort of really screwed up Walmart receipt. She then sat me down and read them aloud back to me in front of my 2 brothers. I tried the old political fallback of deny, deny, deny when she dropped the bombshell. My email login was at the top and bottom of every list. This is really bad, but when I was 13, I was super afraid the zombie apocalypse was going to really happen. So I found and downloaded the Army's Improvised Weapons and Munitions Handbook. Yeah, imagine a 13-year-old with a file labeled explosives on his laptop. Man, I now understand why kids thought I was going to shoot up the school when I mentioned mixing 2 ingredients would make it go boom in chemistry. Plus, I probably ended up on a list somewhere. Now that I'm thinking about it, I might have a flash drive with the book somewhere in my room. To all the people asking for a link, yeah, I'm not going to go down for distributing bomb-making material, so no thanks. And we're all poorer for it, sir. Share your crazy prepper life with us so we can devour it wholesale. Wet, word for female anatomy, games.com. And then I learned about deleting history. Literally the same thing happened to me. All I think about is how happy I am I learned that lesson before I realized I was gay. Parents didn't find, I found on the family computer. My brother would stay up late and look up a bunch of adult flicks and he wouldn't clear the browser history. I, being a very nice brother, would clear it every morning. Eventually, I got so sick of having to do that I changed the desktop wallpaper to say, "Please remember to clear your browser history." That's pretty great. How did he respond to that? He probably thought it was from his parents. Imagine that feeling. I did this to my dad once. Looked up the song Redbone on his phone and it auto-filled to RedTube. Changed his home screen to an image saying, "Clear your history." I did a kind of similar thing to my dad once when I was 15. I was looking for a movie to watch on his computer. He torrents movies instead of buying them because he travels for work a lot and it's easier to have movies and TV shows on files rather than dragging DVDs and stuff around. But anyway, back to the story. And instead of having a nice Harry Potter movie to watch, I found his adult flick stash. I still to this day have no idea how I came across it, considering I've downloaded movies from his laptop numerous times. I renamed all the files to names like, "I know what you're doing," and "Ew," and "Father, I love you, but can you put these somewhere I can't find them, please?" I wonder if he found them. It has never once been discussed. My mum randomly asked for my phone, so I was like, sure. She went through my phone and I had forgotten that I'd downloaded a video from Pornhub about a few days before. She found it and it was a woman riding a guy on a couch. I was in 7th grade. Makes me cringe and laugh. Reminds me of my experience. She walked into the room I was in while I was on my laptop and read what I was reading over my shoulder. All adult fanfiction. I was like 12. She took my computer away and made me go pray. I'm female. I was around 12 years old when my dad found bondage searches on the computer. My searches for big-chested women as well. It was a very, very awkward talk. He taught me how to delete my browsing history too. I'm 23 now, so 11-ish years ago. We're best buddies and text basically every day. Even though his princess might have turned out to be into lesbian bondage stuff, I'm still his favorite kid, out of 5 kids. You're also my favorite out of his 5 kids. I was looking for a way to get high from household items. My mum was not happy or proud. She called me about it when I was 30 minutes into a weekend-long road trip. Sorry, Mum. When I was about 13, my mum found some satanic memes on my phone. They were jokes and pretty much parodies of just girly things on Tumblr. You know, like getting your nails matching with your best friend, just girly things. Like those, except she found one that went, sacrificing your best friends to Satan and pledging your allegiance to the Dark Lord, just girly things. With an image of someone holding a hammer and a nail on top of Justin Bieber's head, when he was just a coconut head, and ready to pound it. Some real edgy humor. Boy, did this land me in hot water. My mum found it, swore I was legitimately satanic, and started shaking and putting her hands over me talking about, "The power of Christ compels you, you leave, demon," and crap like that. Was I really satanic? No, just freaking edgy and dumb in the 8th grade. She tells the family she thinks I'm satanic. She tells the pastor at my local church that she thinks I'm being persuaded by Satan to do evil crap. That I'm giving into temptation. So cue me in this pastor's office as it's a private church/school and he has an office. And he talks to me about why Satan is evil and why I may feel like following him and not God. What's wrong? What's my home situation like? Just took a very awkward conversation when he realizes I'm some naive kid who probably didn't really follow Satan. Took a while for her to believe I wasn't trying to be satanic. She probably still thinks that I was serious, and if it wasn't, then it was too edgy and dark for me to be joking about at that age. But yeah, that's the worst thing. Never been caught lacking with adult flicks. Satanic memes, on the other hand, yes. It does baffle me how much of children's moral guidance seems to be placed in the hands of religious leaders in some places, instead of, educators and trained caregivers. Also, the next video contains numerous references to a particular form of Japanese media consisting of tentacles and adult content. I've invented my own word for it so that this video doesn't get taken down and demonetized. Thanks.
Okay, Mom, firstly, you need to understand that this isn't prawn, right? It's called octoprawn. Yes, that's a Japanese phrase. I'm learning Japanese from these videos. Before I get to the part about learning Japanese, though, let me comment first on the cultural implications of octoprawn. After the Second World War, which Japan lost after the nuclear bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the entire country underwent a period of self-reflection and soul-searching. They wanted to understand how events led to the rest of the world responding with such devastating atomic attacks. This led to a strong antipathy towards warmongering and international aggression. You may have heard about how the Japanese constitution doesn't allow the country to have an active military. Same idea. A lot of post-war Japanese culture is a reflection of such attitudes. For example, the Godzilla movies are not just about giant monsters fighting each other. They're about the horrors of unbridled atomic technology. Godzilla is always depicted as being powered by or healed by nuclear power, and how such a horrifying force can never be allowed to be unleashed on humanity again. On a similar note, Japanese animation enjoyed a resurgence of popularity after the war, due to the populace choosing to turn towards the comforting images of their youth. Japanese kids, much like the kids in our country, like to watch cartoons. As a result, psychologically speaking, cartoons represent a reminder of the simpler and more innocent age. This upsurge in popularity resulted in animated images pervading almost all of Japanese culture, from movies to television to advertising to music videos and so on and so forth. And because animated images were so widely accepted throughout Japan, they were used for almost every type of source material, or to tell any type of story. Animation was no longer the sole domain of children. You got animated movies that told very mature stories, like Ghost in the Machine or Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Sometimes you get stories that involve very mature topics, like war or murder or the unspeakable act or torture. The Japanese have generally become quite accustomed to seeing depictions of such things in their animations. So yeah, that's why I was watching this movie. It's an epic tale about a space crew exploring a distant planet. The crew's all female because Japan's very into gender equality, and they run into a hostile alien with a bunch of tentacles, and well, I don't want to spoil the story for you, but let's just say the crew eventually figure out how to get along with the alien. It's a story about bridging cultural gaps and finding common ground. Seriously, it's worth watching. Okay, next, you remember how I talked about knowing Japanese words and phrases now? It's because these movies are subtitled in English, so I could learn Japanese while watching them. I mean, I know words like yamete and ai and igu and lots of others. Much better than just knowing konnichiwa, isn't it? I mean, I'm developing such an interest in octoprawn that I might just be a major in Japanese when I go to college. Who knows, I might be the one writing the subtitles in the future. Oh, and one last thing, you should know that octoprawn's considered pretty mainstream in Japan now. And it's also quite common in the Western world now, too. Everyone's watching it. I mean, if I don't watch it, I'll be seen as some sort of freak at school. You don't want your son to be some kind of pariah because he doesn't watch octoprawn now, do you?
I was actually 20 when this happened, but it's still a good story. Eating dinner at a restaurant with mum, aunt, uncle, grandmother, roommate, and a couple of family friends. I take out my phone to show my roommate, who sat beside me, a couple of funny selfies I took wearing his glasses. I'm swiping right to show him more photos, and then there's an eggplant pic. A big, veiny, red old eggplant pic. We both jump violently in surprise. I make a sort of squealing sound and we both blush. My mum is sat opposite us and gives us a funny look. She looks like she's about to ask, then decides against it. We eat dinner. When I was like 16 or 17, my parents found an exposed picture on my phone that I sent to my boyfriend at the time. They each separately came into my room to lecture me, /cry about me being a heathen, and then held up the picture of my bare butt the entire time. And then they came in together to pray over me because they thought Satan was trying to take over my body. Undressed photos of my then girlfriend. She thought I had them to blackmail her if I needed to and made a big story out of it, including talking to her father. They found out through my browser history that I was an active participant of a pro-anorexia forum, and they read all of my pathetic posts on there. I also had an accountability thread where I kept track of how much I starved myself, so they were really thrilled to find out about that. That wasn't a good time at all for me. Oofed. We all hope you're doing better now, story writer of that post. That disorder is no joke. Obligatory, not me but my sister, blah blah. Anyway, my sister is showing my grandparents something on her phone. She walks away for a moment to talk to me, then goes to take her phone back. The first thing that she notices is that the Google Assistant was scrolling through her gallery and was showing off the personal pictures she sent to her boyfriend. She's hoping it didn't show, but my grandparents are looking at her very strangely. Thankfully, she had underwear on in the pictures and they didn't include her face. We were able to write it off as being from our weird cousin, but it was still too close for comfort. Google Assistant was barred from gallery after that. What have mine found? Octopron I saved years ago as a curious preteen. What haven't they found? About 40,000 words worth of adult fiction that I've written. So this was funny. I must have been about 15 at the time. My half-sister, 3 years younger, was caught by her dad looking up adult flicks. To be fair to her, my mom decided to search both hers and my search history. Oh no, JPEG. I played it cool while my mom scrolled through months of my search history. I sat in my room watching YouTube or browsing the internet every day. Lots of adult flicks. Worst thing she finds is a Shane Dawson video titled, "She Licked My Ball, XD," or something like that. Oh my god, what is this? It's just a silly YouTube video, click on it, it's okay, I swear. She gets bored after a few minutes. Continues scrolling for a few more months worth of search history. Okay, son, glad to know I can trust you. And gives me a hug. I pleasured myself that night to some hardcore crap, praying my thanks to the incognito gods. I regret nothing. One time back in the day, my brother printed out an exposed girl photo from our family computer and printer. It was not HD to say the least. He apparently hid it in the household computer desk. Mum confronts us a while later about a picture from a web address called Dumpster Hussies. We never got in trouble of any sort, but think she was more worried about viruses. Also, I'm pretty sure one time my mum went to the printer and there was a backlog of orders yet to print, and they were also adult flicks of some sort. When I was much younger, middle school, my mother happened to grab my phone to look for something, and just my damn luck, I'd forgotten to close out of the hub. Especially unfortunate was the fact that when I was 18 and abused ads played as a banner, and my unsuspecting mother tapped that ad, that's what she thought I was watching. So now she thinks I'm into that very unpleasant side of adult flicks, and I had quite the talking to. Thank God she didn't scroll down and see what I was actually watching. Embarrassing to admit, but gay stepbrother fanfiction. Between Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly? Phineas and Ferb? I went through a period where I obsessively looked at adult flicks, about 12 years old. I actually wouldn't pleasure myself or anything, I just watched it because the concept of adult fun times was so new to me. The problem was, I would do it on my mum's computer because I didn't have it on my own. I would do it when she was out of the house walking our dog, but I never knew she was coming back until I heard the click of the front door lock opening. So I had about 4 seconds to close the browser and run to a different room and act like nothing was going on. Well, one day I was a few seconds too late and my mum poked her head into the office just as I was closing the tab. She immediately checked the history and found everything. Her solution was to remove the door from the office room so I couldn't have privacy in there. This was roughly 5 years ago when the entire family shared a computer, and a very crappy one at that. Overheated in an hour of cancerous Facebook game playing, and browser tabs constantly froze. One time I didn't get lucky enough for the tab to close in time for my dad to gain sight of the screen. The whole tab went blank, as that's what it tended to do when it froze, yet the title of the tab only read one word, which my father had to read, knowing full well it was an intentional search. Horse anatomy. My dad saw my interest in computers at an early age, so he bought me one. There wasn't any real pop-up blocker standard back then, so I stumbled upon videos of girls mud wrestling somehow. One thing led to another, and my dad ended up finding my search history. The next day, my dad took away the computer and gave me the talk. Imagine your small, frail librarian, my mother, sitting across from you reading out loud the names of those websites, www and .com included. She just put out her finger every time I tried to talk, fixed her glasses, and continued. My dad once found a not-safe-for-work conversation I was having with a male interest at the time. He read the entire thing back to me, aloud, told me I could be found guilty of being a hussy in a court of law, and showed his friends the entire conversation, including pictures, because it was appalling and disgusting and he needed advice. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.